The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Everything ready to take pictures of.
So what, he was living out there, was he?
He was living on the island.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was coming across. Well, I saw him 2 days in a row.
I suppose there's birds' eggs and stuff like that over there, like, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty for those things to eat.
Right.
Yeah, so, no, it was good. To be able to predict, you don't see too many snakes, do you?
I remember the quarry in Essex. I'd see grass snakes. Milling around. But yeah, luckily I'm not a big fan of snakes. You know,
I was in California last year, walking in the desert in California, and you would see them every single day. And
these are kind of snakes that you don't want to be that close to, I'm guessing.
One of them was a rattlesnake. Wow. Rattlesnakes were the most common. Diamondback rattlesnakes.
And as before you've got anywhere near him, has he heard you? Is the tail
right?
bang,
Okay.
or?
So most people were walking along, and you get that, and you cannot miss that sound. But I had really, really soft heels on my shoes. And I think I was very, very light on my shoes because I was seeing a lot more snakes than everybody else. I said, "Do you see many snakes today?" And they go, No, I didn't see. I was seeing loads.
Yeah, but that sounds really bad, like you're going to spook them.
Yeah. So that's what happened one day. I was just come round this corner, and 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, that was prime time for seeing them. They're just starting to heat themselves up. And I got within me to you away from a shrub bush, and the whole bush erupted, and it flared up out the shrub bush like a cobra, and it was like, holy shit. And I was like, all right, okay. And it was a big one as well. And it backed down, and then it slivered up the back. And as soon as I moved, it went again. But I was thinking, if I had my music on, I was walking with my music on, that thing was in a strike position.
Yeah.
Rattlesnakes, they're not normally that aggressive.
No, I guess it's self-defense. You've startled him, hasn't he?
Otherwise,
if he probably could have chosen, if he'd heard you earlier, like you kind of suggested, he would have slithered away. But
yeah. Well, one girl that I was walking with, she said she was like this really gentle, timid girl. But she loved nature, and she was a lot stronger than she looked. And she said one afternoon, you stop walking in the afternoon because it gets so hot. Find some shade somewhere in the desert, and she had a nap, and she was sleeping on she had a rucksack as a pillow, and when she woke up, there was a rattlesnake coiled up right next to her.
God, sunning himself.
Yeah. Anyway, Aaron Copp, we're live. We're recording.
Cool.
Thank you. Welcome there. Glad to see you on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me.
No worries. So at the start of the show, as is normal now, Aaron, we have a gift. Well, we hope you've brought a gift in for us. Have you remembered something?
I have, yes.
Okay. So what have we got here?
I've got a snag ear and a small story about the perils. The perils of maybe fishing locked up in the winter at night. It was a few years back now, and I'd got shown a picture of a not particularly big fish, but a local fish, and it was a pretty upper 20 fully scaled. And I thought, wow, that's it's nice fish. And then when I found out exactly where it was, like a 2-minute drive from my house, I thought, done an awful lot of travelling, to fish here, there, and everywhere. I thought, that would be cool to go and have a go for it. So. Long story short, I managed to catch it on the first time I was down there, which was a bit flukish because I think it is the biggest fish in there, and I'd had a 19 as well. But I was chatting to one of the locals down there, and he was saying there's a few other pretty ones in there. So I thought, I could, and also because it was so local, it gave me the option. I was working in the city then, that I could, like on a Wednesday or something, if I was going to fish, the Saturday night, I could sneak a little bit of bait in. So I thought, this is all good. So I did that, and I think it was the second night I ever did on there was in the period between Christmas and New Year, and there was a big low pressure, so it was real carpy weather, and I'd been baiting this kind of overhang, and it was not a serious snake, but enough that if I'd hooked a carp right next to the bush, I didn't want it ploughing into it, so I'm fishing at a right angle. Got stainless steels, single bank sticks, so they're all in the ground pretty snag ears.
Yep.
And I've got the bite. I've woken up to a bite. I think it was around about 11 o'clock. And it was like, Neville, couple of bleeps. I'm scrambling for the torch. It was, there's a bit, wet and windy. So you're not completely sure that it's a take at that stage. But obviously, you're always heightened when you're snag fishing, thinking that it could be. And I did hear a splash, but I hadn't panicked at this stage. And when I've shown the torch, it's just like, oh, my God. I was using my long range stuff, which was totally not matched for the venue, but it was just about being lazy. I've been fishing somewhere else, so it was 12 foot, 3.5 pound high S rods, Shimano Technium reels that are quite collectible now. So I'm thinking it was probably the best part of 700 plus pounds is gone. Not to mention, the carp as well. And all it was, I guess what the saving grace was, is that because it was so small, I immediately reeled in the other rod and started casting all the way along, like, where I thought the where I thought the fish was going to be. But it turns out, like, I think it was the best part of 2 hours. So I'm standing there. It's not freezing cold, because it's a low pressure, but I'm in my boxers, you're wet, questioning your sanity for, like, fishing this place, given I'd already caught the biggest one. Probably the upside was a pretty 20. And now I just managed to lose a 700 pound setup. So anyway, because it was small enough, I kept going, and in the end, I hooked up with a rod, and it was a bit like a scalloper. Like, in the darkness, the butt sections come out, and the hook was in the duplon, but it was a false dawn, because I'm just thinking, you're trying to, reach to get it, and the bloody hook had pulled. So it's gone back in again. But I tried to keep relatively calm. So you've gone from, I've got it back, all the excitement, to it's gone again. And I'm figuring, now the rough area, keep going. And eventually I did catch the line between the tip eye and the next eye down and get it in. It was literally, that was a 19 pound common, because it was still on, so I got it in.
Amazing how strong they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's solid stainless steel.
Totally bent it.
Yes, I mean, in retrospect, it is bit user error, because I think if I'd had a maybe a different type of butt grip, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But I guess you've got to the violence of the take and probably the rod riding out, and it's managed to bounce over, and you can see it's bent it out.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of people were snagging. I mean, you just think, well, that's an assurance policy, really, isn't it? That you're not going to lose your rods like that. I think we were talking. I said to you, I think the reason why you brought the subject up a few days ago was because I was fishing it like 125 yards out, and I had a bite with some Neville's, and it just completely wrenched it straight off of the off the alarms. And I start using snag ears now, but not quite as long as that. So it just gets, but the power of those fish is
for a relatively small fish as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it is a little bit of a lesson. Like, you've got to be, when people talk about fishing locked up, then you really want to make sure that the rod is totally solid and isn't going anywhere, because giving half a chance, that's what an upper double can do. Not now think about a fighting fit 35 or something. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that. We'll add that to the pile's getting bigger now.
Yeah, a few bits and pieces.
We've got all sorts of
original
different
Korda book there, and
Danny's first book, and PVA bags, all sorts there. Yeah, it's nice. Like I say, we want to make it feel homely, and we couldn't do this without people bringing their own little bits in to make it a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, I first heard about you. To be honest, I didn't know an awful lot about you until earlier this year. Damo mentioned that he'd given you Tom Banks's address details for Savay, and he said, "You want to watch this guy? This guy called you a Terminator." You've been called a Terminator before?
I don't know if it's good or bad. No.
No. And he did. And now he did say, watch him, because he might catch some fish on Savay on days this year. And just to sort of put it into perspective, catching carp out of Savay on days, I mean, I know what that was like. It was very, very hard for me. I didn't manage to do it. And you could probably put the syndicate together, 50 odd anglers, and you probably count a handful of fish. So so I was quite interested to see what you were getting. And within a week of you fishing the lake, I think you caught one. So and then since then I've been following you. Is it Carp Journey that
yes, yeah. Carp _journey, I think.
Underscore journey. Yeah.
My initial flurry into social media.
Yeah. No, well, it's good, because, like I say, I think you're bringing to the attention of people, what people under the radar are catching a little bit. You're fishing a lake in Kent a lot as well, aren't you?
Yes, this season, yeah, and it's they're really pretty fish in there.
Yeah.
And, look, those very, very special old carp, like the ones in Savay, like the stocking in the Kent Lake, they're equally lovely fish, but they're much younger, so you kind of feel like there's time there. But when there was the chance to have a go on days on Savay, you're gonna run with it.
Yeah, potentially the clock's ticking on these old fish, isn't it?
They're very, very old now. Well, they're amazingly old, aren't they, when you think of some of the ones that are still in there.
Yeah, we had a little fishing trip the other day, didn't we?
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I caught one more.
You did. Yeah,
I terminated you.
Yeah. Oh, it's all good. As soon as you get to this time of year, look, you've always got to get it all exactly right, but it's starting to, the lakes are slowing down and you've got to...
Well, in fairness, actually, I think you probably helped me catch a fish the other night. I was pretty keen to wind my rods in the other morning, actually, and go and have a look. If I wake up and I'm not seeing them, I want to try and find somewhere on the lake where I am. And you said it might be worthwhile leaving the rods in the water, not doing anything. And I have to admit, that's something that I've never done before.
Well, that is. I mean, that's something I think would be, if someone was new coming into the sport, hobby, pastime, passion, whatever you want to call it, is probably the hardest thing to kind of put across and to learn, because there are some times of the years and some venues where talking yourself into staying where you are and it's going to happen in 5 minutes, it's going to happen in an hour or something, is exactly the wrong thing to do. But I kind of felt like, we never got our rods out until late, did we? I mean, I think we were kind of casting and spodding at 4 o'clock-ish, a couple of hours before it was dark, and that's a fair amount of disturbance. I mean, we both know we can get a quick bite, but spodding is on top of where you're put. It's still not the best thing if you're trying to get a best bite. Yeah, we're having to, because of seagulls and stuff like that and bird life, to to introduce the bait in. But that's why I kind of felt like give it a little bit of time, because we had an inkling, especially where you are as well, that there were fish about, so it made sense. But I think if that is the time of year, like when we move into the autumn and winter. You don't always know exactly when the bite time's going to come. I mean, obviously in autumn we're favouring the hours of darkness, and particularly the evening, and that is the way it played out. And the second night you were away. Yeah,
no, it was interesting, and like I say, we didn't see, the pressure was pretty low actually, and quite strange conditions, weren't they? Because the pressure was low, there was no wind, and the pressure has remained low this week as well.
But it didn't really feel like that though, did it?
No, it didn't.
Because we had big winds just a couple of days before, or storms in some parts of the country.
Yeah. So no, I think already I'm learning from you. You haven't sort of publicised stuff previously. Why did you decide to start going on Instagram now and doing all this, Aaron?
Well, I guess there were two things. Yeah. So to answer that question, I'd spent 25 years of my life working in the financial markets, and I decided I wanted a break. And one of the things I wanted to do on that break was, write about some of the angling that I'd done. So that was nearing. I mean, I've learnt that I've done a fair amount of writing to do with work, but it wasn't descriptive writing. It was like, you're trying to get a message over as quickly as possible, and there's no stars for, using 3 sentences if you could have used 1. But descriptive writing is definitely a skill that I'm trying to learn. So, writing the book has taken a little bit longer than I first envisaged, but the bulk, it's done now. I'm just waiting on a bit of artwork and stuff like that.
So the book is going to cover your fishing right from the start up until now?
The first time, from 96 onwards, and pretty much everywhere. I mean, there are some places that, unfortunately, that I would have liked to write about, but I'm not, because they're publicity bans, which is a bit of a shame, because some of those fish are super special. But hey, that's, if you sign up to, that you got to respect it. But yeah, pretty much everywhere I fished from first setting foot on Darren Big Lake in 1996.
Should be a good read, shouldn't it? Hopefully.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, it's realistic. Like for long periods, or with the bulk of that book, I would like to think that your average carp angler can totally relate to it. Meaning that work and your life is dictating when you can go fishing, and not the other way around. You're having to fit it in. And I hope, I remember, being a youngster, and obviously it's pre the internet and pre social media, and lapping up everything I could, on the writing front. And clearly it's evolved, and in terms of, we now have social media, but what I'm trying to say is I was inspired by the writing of others, and hopefully, I might, achieve that to a little bit of a degree.
Yeah, have you got a title for the book yet? Or
it probably would be. More than likely, I'll go with the Instagram tag. Is that Carp Journeys?
Yeah.
So probably what I'll go with.
Yeah, and you expect that out sometime soon, or?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when. It'll kind of be done when it's done. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, the writing's done, but I already have learned that some of this stuff is the other bits and pieces taking longer than expected. So I don't know. I'll give a shout out to anyone who's followed me when we get there.
Yeah, excellent. So how do you find the old Instagram stuff? I always find it hard work, to be honest. I don't mind using it for following people like yourself and getting information for the podcast and stuff. But I find that sort of thing hard work. Do you find it like that?
Well, if I answer the question honestly, I was a little bit reluctant to use social media because I guess I just dwelled on some of the negatives of it. There definitely are positives, but I think there are quite a few. You can. It's a very difficult subject, because in the sense is that obviously there is a fair amount of boasting, with social media and people trying to sell stuff, but there can be negativity as well. Thankfully, touch wood, I haven't been experiencing that. And we chatted about that, didn't we, the other day? And I think you made a point, and I've heard someone else say that different forms of social media can be different, which feels strange because you think it's the same people behind them. But there's also, I've also, got back in touch with people that, I haven't fished alongside for an age. And even Damian was an example of that. I hadn't chatted to Damian, I think, until I was, I think the last time I maybe saw him in person could have been on the banks of Sutton. And you pop up and post me. The next minute you're having a chat about Combe Valley carp, and so there is real positives as well. Yeah,
and Instagram's nice. It's imaginative as well, isn't it? It can catch the imagination a little bit, and it's creative, isn't it? And you can tell stories through pictures.
I think
like
that is that I'd say is another real positive that I should have said. I mean, there's some really skillful photographers out there. It's that arty bit, I can hold my own in taking a portrait shot, and I know my way around a camera. But when you watch some of the more creative guys, that's inspirational.
Yeah.
They clearly got their camera ready and thinking about what they're doing. But I guess it's just like carp fishing. That doesn't come without work. And there's some really talented photographers.
Well, your carp fishing's bred a lot of photographers, hasn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, because look, you're out in nature. And you do see, I mean, when you think about the amount of, sunrises and sunsets that you see, you're seeing way more than a normal person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just touching on your job briefly before, I mean, how did you become a high frequency futures trader? Is that the right term for you?
Well, I guess to set the scene, I mean, for the first part of my career, I was broking stroke sales, and that's what I was doing. I started working in London very early. Like I did work experience at 15. I was going to go on and do my my A levels and my GCSEs, but I asked if there was a job going at the firm that I did the experience with, and there was, and I took it. I think there was a chance to do that then, because the city was still in some areas expanding, rapidly. I don't think that would be a career path that like my children could replicate.
You need to come out of university.
Yeah, I think you've got to. Well, if you're working for the big institutions in London, unfortunately, not just come out of university, but probably the best universities in the world if you're going to go and work for one of the big investment banks. So there was a period when you could do that, and initially I was working for a stockbroker. Then I got into futures broking, financials, where and that evolved significantly in the time I was there. You went from open outcry trading, which was, you might have seen some snippets of that in films like Trading Places and stuff like that. It's really exciting stuff. And then you had the internet, and wow, it's changed beyond all recognition to from people physically trading in pits and shouting open outcry to now
trading from home and
all kinds of things, trading in a blink of an eye to, like you touched on, the last 5 years when I was working in the markets, I was working for a trading firm that was based in Europe and had their servers, in the co-location centres in America.
Yeah.
So you're controlling them remotely, and trading very, very quickly between two exchanges, and it's
you said how quickly it's sped up as well over the last.
Yeah, it did. It changed rapidly, even for my small period of time, working for the trading firm. I think it went from, a thousandth of a second, the resolution, to multiple, decimal places, zeros, I should say. After that, it's without a doubt. I would liken it to Formula One. Literally the same, because when some of the strategies are known, then it is an arms race. Whether or not it's using microwave to trade between 2 points, and then who's got their own tower, or the way obviously the algorithms are written. It's
how do you? I mean, what does it take to survive in that industry, for an individual?
Well, I don't think that would be different to any other industry, like about whether you're passionate about whether you're doing the same thing for,
Is it quite cutthroat though?
Oh, for sure, yeah. But then maybe other industries are as well, but maybe it's more visible there. But yeah, for sure it is, yeah. And if it's trading, futures trading, it's a zero-sum game. If somebody's won, somebody's lost.
Right.
So yeah, for sure it is, yeah. But I guess by definition it would be cutthroat.
What about the image of the city? I mean, is that quite accurate? People that don't know too much about it, would that be quite accurate that it's quite brash and?
I think that's changed.
Right.
Dare I say it, you would probably be maybe touching on the term we would be using in the 80s or something like that, or the 90s, like a yuppie. I think it's way more professional now, on the whole. Clearly there are people are still working that have experienced like it evolving, but I would say it's very professional and very driven people and all hard, very hard working.
I mean, so obviously you have to make fast decisions doing what you're doing. I mean, how does that decision making kind of come into your own fishing? Are there any parallels there with what you've done for a job in fishing?
I suppose, for sure, in the line of work, you have to make educated decisions, especially on the trading side when things were happening very quickly, and it's not like you could bury your head in the sand and it's going to get better. Quite the reverse, it's going to get worse. So you've got to make an educated decision and do it, and then implement, whether you're getting out of a position or whatever. So I suppose there are some, a bit like with fishing, in that obviously very different. What's at stake, but if you're making a decision about to stay where you are or move swims or something, you've got to.
Well, that's what I noticed about you fishing. That you. Oh, okay. So they're not algorithms, but you do seem to be able to recall information quite quickly. And when we were walking around the lake the other day, you were quite quick to sort of, don't like that area. I mean, and obviously there's a lot of experience there, and you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together there.
Well, I think for sure. I think if you're fishing anywhere that's challenging. If you're going to go on there and, dare I say it, be kind of like weak-minded, you might even be defeated before you've even started. You've got to be confident, but it doesn't mean I'm always right, that's for sure. You're going to get a feel for something hopefully from the experience of all the, the venues that you've been before. And it doesn't always play out exactly the same, but clearly there are similarities. So when we were walking around the banks of Savay, I'm trying to think, how does this compare with other people? And for me, clearly I've only just touched the surface of Savay, but I can see that coming into the winter it's challenging because, there isn't one central area or one set of snags where I think they're going to migrate to here. There's 3 distinct areas and plenty of other nooks and crannies of where they can be. So it makes it way more challenging to get a feel where the bulk of them are. Yeah.
Just talking about your own fishing, and do you tend to fish on your own, Aaron, a lot, or with friends?
I guess different periods of time, and depending where I've been, would give a different answer. So like for instance, back in the summer, my good friend Dave Levy and I both had a ticket on this Kent Lake, so we weren't religiously there at the same time, but quite often we might be about and we might fancy a similar area. So that was quite nice to be, to be fishing alongside Dave for a bit. I mean, he does quite a bit of filming work within the angling side. So quite often he wasn't always there, but so that was nice, in terms of having a bit of fun while you're doing it as well. When you go back to the Walthamstow days, a lot of that I was fishing alongside Dave. In the more recent time, generally, I'm out there doing it on my own. Yeah.
You find it advantageous to have a friend that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, and it can work both ways, can't it?
Oh no, without a doubt. I mean, even if I am not fishing alongside Dave, we're always bouncing our ideas off each other and talking about whatever lake you're fishing and where you are. Only today he was talking about somewhere where it was going to be a bit tactical about maybe using a potentially like a more natural bait, and I know that lake is particularly weedy, and it was kind of like what we were touching on about, like where you might have an optimum presentation, like the length of your rig, but if the bottom dictates you can't do that, and you've got maybe a bait that you think they're really going to be attractive to, then maybe you're going to not use the optimum rig, but use one that's definitely going to be presented. Yeah. So yeah, we were both, and when I said that today, he said I was thinking exactly along the same lines. So I guess what I'm trying to say, regardless whether we're fishing the same lake, we're still chatting about what we're up to and what the plan is. And
yeah, you need a bit of help from others at times, don't you? And you need other perspective. Yeah. It's just when you're on lakes as well. I mean, it's probably trying to keep a little bit to yourself as well, isn't it? And not feel obliged to have to be with someone enough to share.
Well, I'm not. Oh, look, that's what you're touching on there. It depends where you are and what type of anglers that you've got around. I've seen the good and the bad in the very recent past. Like I've seen on this summer on Savay, where rota members could have stepped in when I caught and made it more difficult for me, and they did the complete reverse. They were gentlemanly behaviour, and then I fished other lakes in the very recent past that I won't name that it was the other end of the scale. But that is the reality of fishing. I guess. What some people would say circuit waters. Yeah, there's a difference there, isn't it? Definitely. It's more ruthless, I guess. Yeah, people are very driven to catch for be it themselves or maybe even a company, and they wouldn't worry about whether that's in spite of someone else.
There's certain situations that you I sense this as well with you, that there were certain situations where you got quite excited about the chances of catching a carp more easily. I mean, what type of situations are there where you think, right, this is it, this is going to be a little bit easier now? Oh,
well, do you mean in terms of finding them and getting
finding them, and probably what you were talking about was shallow water as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'd have to touch on Savay there for the recent past, but yeah, I mean, if you can find them in the daytime, in the summer, and they're in shallow water, then just by definition, I mean, if they were like go flash place now to the Lockwood days where it's 34, 35 foot deep, just because you've seen a carp, whether it's showing or you can see him visibly, if he's not on the marginal shelf, then the question is he going to go anywhere near the bottom? And then suddenly, if I can find fish that are in 2.5 foot of water and the carp's 35 pounds. The odds of him, the odds of him seeing the baits, this is you're the probability of getting the result that you want, of creating, getting him to feed is just so much more, in your favour to catch him.
Yeah, absolutely. What about spooking fish in shallow water and stuff? I mean, do you find that potentially the longevity of the swim can be sacrificed a little bit because of catching them out of shallow water?
I think that's interesting, and we did touch on that, didn't we, when we were having a little chat? And I mean, I had a situation on Savay where. I can't be sure that I'm right, but when I look back, there was an algae bloom this year, and the water clarity went from when I first stepped on the lake. It was pretty much crystal clear, for fish finding, fish spotting, superb, yeah. And what was it? Within a couple of weeks, it had started, and then it started resembling, a luminous, pea soup, you know. Initially, I was like, my first thought was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to find anything. And it does make it harder without a doubt. But, okay, carp in shallow water, you know, there's still going to be tells, be it a little swell, you know, a flat spot or something like that. So there was fish to be found. And when I look back, maybe some of the times when there was multiple catches, my gut feeling is I got away with not spooking the rest of the fish because maybe they couldn't see as easy what was going on. And if that same scenario maybe played out like maybe last year, if the water quality was better on the lake, you know, you maybe hooked one and the rest of them would like see you and they're all gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really like a perk of a situation, as opposed to you know, you actively looking for it, if you know what I mean. It was just, you know, the way it played out.
Something else I heard you talking about as well was a Tutti Frutti original to Richworths. I mean, I think Dan just mentioned that as well, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you just want to talk about those and the effect that those baits potentially can have on?
You know, when did I first? I first used a toot, as we call them, the Richworth Tuttis. It's got to be the frozen ones as well, because I don't know if they still do.
Do you think it's base mix, or do you think it's the actual flavour additive that's in those that make this?
Right. I should be careful here, because I was under the impression it was a fairly cheapest carrier base mix, but that might be wrong. That was my, you know, it was to do with the flavour and the leakage. But I could be wrong. Maybe it's both. You know, so maybe someone else would have more of an inkling there. But I do remember there was at one stage you could buy shelf life ones, and that wasn't the one to have. It had to be the frozen ones. So I felt I first introduced to that bait, and don't get me wrong, they've been out way before that. In 1996, winter of 96 on Darren, a guy called Pete Perrings, really nice guy and really good angling, and he was a big advocate of the bait, particularly in the winter. Like, so it really continues to release the flavour level, the height, you know, and it really is a good attractor, no matter how cold the water is. And I don't know why, but it works particularly well in silts. You know, whereas some, and maybe that is the base mix, but some baits really kind of absorb the smell of the bottom. You know, you could really, you know, and your bait smells pretty rank, and you're thinking, oh, you know, that probably didn't help me catching. Well, the toot was never like that. It almost, it kind of, you know, repelled any you know, any bad smells on the bottom. So it was really good to learn that you know, how you know, just how powerful using the right bait in the right situation is. Because that's the tricky thing about carp fishing. It isn't just one thing. It's many different things, and trying to do them right at the right time. So we know location trumps everything, because clearly if the carp's half a mile away, no matter what you put in front of him, you're not gonna catch him. But all the rest of the components are, you know, matter as well a great deal. You know, like, so when you have found them, you know, giving them a bait they're going to accept, creating a feeding situation if that's what you're trying to do, and not least the rig as well. So it all plays a part, and it's all significant. So, yeah, Pete introduced me to the toot in the winter, and I guess the reason I have to say that is that I give him credit, because it's definitely due. And where I ran with that was, you know, unfortunately, my timing on Darren, it was just fate. The lake was changing. There'd been introduction of fish from abroad, and there was losses, and it quickly wasn't the lake that I'd read so much about. So just like Savay, and you're really inspired. It was like one of the main places I wanted to go, and unfortunately, it changed, and very rapidly. So I'd met Dave on a local lake a few years before. I'd gone working off in the city, and Dave had joined the Paras, and then I re-bumped into Dave in '97 on the big lake. So we remembered we'd, you know, seeing each other on a local lake. You know, that was the start of us becoming, you know, really good friends. Dave, he moved first. I guess the truth was, you know, when you're you still want the dream to be real. Like, I wish the changes on Darren weren't happening. You were kind of hanging around for an ever-decreasing pool of fish. And Dave, he pulled the trigger first and went over to Walthamstow. And it was his encouragement that led me to eventually going over there. So when I did initially go over there, I was using a food bait. But when the cold weather arrived, I switched straight over to the Richworth toot, as did Dave. And what was really brilliant about it as well was where it come into its own. So, you know, when we started fishing the more challenging reservoirs in the spring, where the water level is still relatively cold, it's just a brilliant single hook bait. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to compare it to a food bait. I mean, it's for that particular, and there are some negatives. It's a very soft bait. So if you've got I mentioned, like, if you're trying to whack it out, I mean, you can't have too many miscasts, so you're going to have to put a new bait on. And if there's bird lice and stuff like that, but if you can get it where you need it on that kind of single hook bait fishing where it's all location, then it is very, very
you wonder with that softness as well whether that is part of the magic ingredient of that bait as well. I remember beetling as well. Beetling, if you were, someone said to me they were fishing over silt in France and they were trying to flavour plastic, and the only flavour that they could get was beetling that would really hold the smell. And it's another sweet.
Yeah, well,
similar to Tutti
for all
frutti.
I know, it could be an ingredient. I'm not sure.
So should we get onto your fishing a little bit? And so your big fishing started on Darren in the early 90s. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's where I was. I had some fortune as a young angler that I happened to be around an area of the lake where they gather before they spawn. So I think in one 24-hour period, I was lucky enough to catch 10 out of the Darren Big Lake, which was quite a lot.
What year was that?
That was 96. That was a summer of 96.
Right.
And I caught my first 30s from the Big Lake. I always intended to go and fish the Tip Lake because it's had some very special fish, but. Yeah, like I sort of touched on before, the lake's changed, and then we went off to Walthamstow, and that I guess of all the places I fished, I think it's fair to say that was probably the most influential.
Sorry, Darren.
No,
Walthamstow.
the Walthamstow reservoirs, because I'll never forget just how key location is there, and on the whole, they're generally there's a few factors. You're day fishing, I should say that, for anybody who doesn't know the complex. So, you're not going down there thinking, I'm going to introduce bait and I'm going to sit here for 3 days and wait for them to come. You can't angle like that. I mean, I guess, obviously you can sneak a bit of bait in and try and get back in the same area. But what I'm trying to get at is that you feel like you should always be making the absolute most of the time that you've got. And generally, quite a few of these reservoirs, stroke lakes, are big expanses of water, and some of them were pretty low stocked. So you really got it drummed into you that you've got to find them.
Those lakes seem to breed a certain type of angler as well. I mean, I remember turning up there at 7 a.m, and it's like, what's going on here? They were all ready at the gate at 7 o'clock, ready to go. Yeah. I mean, it must have taught you a bit about mobility as well, and being able to move quickly on your feet there.
Yeah, well, I suppose, we're talking about, that was, when did I first go out there? That would be like 90, I think I was in the autumn of 98. So, just over 20 years ago. So, 20 years younger. David only just come out of the army, so he was super fit. We didn't use barrows back then. I think there might have been one or two about, but I remember seeing somebody with a barrow once, and we were like, what do we want to do that for? Yeah. But obviously, I use a barrow now, and if you are session fishing, clearly it's better to be able to move a lot of kit around. But we did pride ourselves on travelling light. So, rods in a quiver. You didn't take 10 leads with you and stuff like that. You took, I seem to remember back then we were using a lot of inline leads actually, so you weren't really going to lose a lead anyway, unless you happened to crack off, and we didn't do that very often. But so you take a couple of spares, and you travelled light. Did you
know where you were? Did you fish multiple days in a row on there?
Back then I was still relatively young, so you wanted to have a social life as well. So I was generally fishing one day of the weekend. And you were generally, obviously, you're going out for a beer or whatever in the evening. So not normally multiple days, unless I'd taken time off work, I guess would be.
And you're fishing on the 2 and 3 at the time?
Yeah, that was the first place. So Dave was already on there when he said, you've got to come over and have a go. They're really, he was showing me some pictures, and they really were attractive fish. And I think the first ever day that I went there was a real red letter day for Dave. So he'd got a bait established, a food bait established. Now that time he did have an inkling where he went, and I'm like, I'm obviously being guided, So I ended up, doubling up with Dave in an area. I remember we had a big wind coming into us on I think what they call the Tea Party 2. And there is a bit of a funny story this, because anybody knows Dave knows he loves a wind up, and we were both using baits from the Nash bait stable back then, and I think Dave was using a version of the squid mix, and I was using a version of the Monster Pursuit. Both good baits in their own right, and I've been doing well on Darren with the bait I was using anyway, and I think we're on fish, they're showing, quite exciting, you know, big ripple on the wall, so they're not far out either. This was all at sort of 60 yards range, so really exciting when they were showing. And Dave very quickly has had a couple of fish. I think even when he'd had one, he started giving me, you know, the banter, would you like me to use some of my bait? And I kind of given him some, you know, flippant response. Anyway, I think it was either after he'd had 2 or 3, it was blatantly obvious they were switched on to his bait. He's got it established. And at that stage, any kind of flippant comment that I'd made, I was beep reversing, and yeah, could I have some of your bait, please, mister? Yeah. And you know what? I have to say, you know, I when I flipped over it's exactly the same areas, and just goes to show you when a bait is established, you know, they have a preference. So we're talking about the same kind of silty areas. I might have moved fractionally closer to Dave's rods, and I blamed the wind. And I had a couple of 20s. And on that day, as I said, Dave ended up with, I think it was 5, including the Sergeant, which was the biggest fish in the lake. So my first ever day on Walthamstow reservoirs, I've just seen him catch 5 big fish. You know, the Sergeant, I think that was a mid-30, like 35, something like that. So at the time, these are big fish. And what really drummed into me was that, and what was so exciting is that, without getting a violin out, you know, if you're working, you know, Monday to Friday, and I was up in the city, you know, I've got to get commute home from the city, get in the car, drive to Kent, you know, you're at a disadvantage. You're getting the very, very limited swim choices. And it was just like, wow, you can turn up at Walthamstow on a Saturday, every day's a new day, and it's not like somebody got there on Thursday and he's in the swim that you want. So it's a much more of a level playing field.
Did it feel a disadvantage if, or more of an advantage if you were there the day before, and then, I mean, you were saying you're doing 1 day a week, so how did you know what lake to fish or where to be heading?
Well, we did stay on the same venue, so we weren't flipping around.
Right.
That didn't generally happen too much. And I think back then, to be fair, some days Dave was stringing a couple of days together. So, but he might have done that on done a Wednesday, because I think he was working shifts, so he might have already been down there. And clearly, if you've got knowledge, that's an advantage. But the big thing that, you know, about the 2 and the 3 in the autumn, and even in the winter, they show. So it really, even if you're in a vacuum and you hadn't got a clue what had happened before, if you're actually angling and you're watching, at some stage they're going to tell you where they are. Right. And as we moved into the winter, we just saw distinct patterns. You know, once we found them, they were in a certain area for.
Okay, what sort of patterns were you finding?
Well, the main one is that they'd be in an area for a while before probably angling pressure moved them out of it. You know, I distinctly remember like the area they call like the South End swims on the 2 and the 3. You know, at the back end they were there for quite a while, and then suddenly, you know, that area would dry up and you might see a show somewhere else. But it was a lot of it was reacting to sightings. So you really, you know, like I said before, like it is, you know, that it's always location. It was just being drummed into you all the time that you've got to be watching. And really, what was, you know, the kind of like competitive side down there, you couldn't be having a debate with yourself about moving, because there were very keen anglers there. You know, like if you think, you know, you could wait until you've seen the third carp show, or somebody's already moved. Yeah. Did they
have a preference for, you know, winter areas on the lake generally? Then, I mean, if
for sure,
south-facing areas like we were talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there are island fishing on the 2 and the 3 reservoir. So clearly, you know, you probably go at it slightly different technique. You know, if you're there in the height of the summer, there were some snaggy islands that the fish, you know, did still hold up around in the winter for sure. I can't honestly say, you know, it's been over 20 years since I fished the 2 and the 3. Whether they were south facing or not, I don't remember, but may well have been. And if they were, then it's obviously that added encouragement to be there, snags and the sun warming them as well. But, you know, generally speaking, we were catching from more of the open water areas. Yeah, and then really what. You know, I distinctly remember Dave and I talking about, like, you know, there's all these other big fish on the complex, and did we want to kind of work through some of the other lakes, like for instance the Lower Maynard and the Higher, that both had good fish, or just go straight
to the big one?
Yeah, and in the end, they were, Thames Water offered a ticket where you could fish the Lockwood, which is the north side of the of the road, the main road that separates the complex, which also offered fishing for the West Warwick as well on the south. And they were at the time the two biggest lakes that held sizable carp, and by far the biggest as well.
Yeah. So Lockwood, what acreage?
I think I've seen different numbers quoted, and I don't know. It could be just because this is a real big expanse of water, depending on how much water's in it. But I think the last thing I read, it actually said 74 acres.
Right. Okay.
74, 3/4 of a mile-ish long.
You've got some depth there, haven't you?
Yeah,
as well?
Definitely 30 foot plus. Depending on where you are on the lake, because it's bathtub-ish shaped. It probably middle areas is 400-ish yards wide. So certainly at the time we couldn't cast anywhere near the middle. But interestingly, when you get to the north end of the lake, where the southwesterlies would channel, substantially narrower, and that does play in later on. It becomes much more castable. I think you were only talking there about 250 yards across.
And did you know exactly what you were fishing for in that lake? It seemed to have a few mysteries in there as well.
Yeah,
didn't
it definitely did. We did know. I mean, obviously there was carp talk around, and just like now, there was some publicity. So what we 100% knew was we knew of a 40-pound miracle that I don't know if it had to name the sub then or not, but either way, we knew that particular mirror was a very long fish. And there was a lever that subsequently was known as the Lockwood lever, which wasn't 40, but it was in and around it. But there were more, without a doubt. And also there was the type of angler that were fishing there. They weren't all publicising, so 100% an air of mystery.
Where did they come from, the fish? Do you know?
Oh, I remember Dave saying to me he had once read there was some stocking records in where you go and pay your money on the hut. I can't quite remember what the strain was. I want to say it was the 70s, early 70s when they first come in the site.
So they were relatively old fish by the time you started fishing there.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, yeah.
And so how do you approach a water, a vast open lake like that? I mean, in some ways it can be an advantage because you can see a lot. So you were talking about location and maybe fishing with single baits as being the key on Lockwood.
Well, we'd just come off of the 2 and the 3, and I don't think anyone caught any more than Dave and I in the time we were there. So the reason I mention that is that you're super confident in the approach. Dave's food bait that he'd been introducing worked absolutely brilliantly, but as soon as that water started to become cold, we're nailing them on the toots. And the thing about the toot as well is that any old school anglers, this bait had been used heavily, but probably 10 plus years before. It was kind of gone through a cycle where people are just dismissing it because there were, much better baits out.
We might be going for another cycle now.
Yeah, well, maybe like more nutritional baits. I say rather than better is probably the way of saying it. So the reason I say that is we're pretty cocksure that if we can find them, certainly in the spring when the water's still cold, that we're going to get bites. Where we did have some uncertainties about is because neither of us had fished in waters that were that deep. So you really didn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I felt like that they would go down to the bottom. In fact, and I know subsequently, obviously there are lakes like Bundy's where carp get caught way deep in that. But at the time, I didn't know. So you did kind of feel like, well, should we be fishing, the marginal shelf, or should we be casting out? So that was where there was some uncertainty. But we went up there with initially, at least for that, the game plan was we'll fish the Lockwood for the spring. The West Warwick's got the traditional close season, so June the 16th when it opens, and then come what may, we'll move across. And to kind of set the scene a little bit, when we talk to the bailiffs, this is supposed to be absolutely granite, and everybody goes up there is catching next to nothing, which there was an element of truth on that. I think in all the time Dave and I were up on the Lockwood, we saw one other carp caught. I'm pretty sure it was Terry Dempsey had one when Dave had his first fish. So it definitely could be a very challenging, if you weren't lucky to be there on the right days with the right weather.
Were there days on there with the weather where you just ride it off because of the depth?
Well, I remember the first day. I mean, it wasn't so much the depth then, it was just like the weather. We were up there with, a northerly blowing. Early April, it was
pretty chilly.
Yeah, it was miserable. In one of those days where it's raining all the time, you're huddled under an umbrella, not a real fish spotting day, and you're already starting to think, are we going to manage to get anything out of here? But thankfully, as shortly as my next trip, just completely different weather. Like my next trip down there was a westerly wind. some cloud cover, the kind of weather that you think I can get a take in the daytime. The problem with a westerly wind on the Warwick, as I just said, it's 3/4 of a mile long. It's hitting the entire bank. So it's north to south. So 3/4 of a mile of bank of getting this westerly wind. So I've set up halfway along it, and I remember distinctly that second session I'm on my own. So first one with Dave when we blanked. Next time down, a week's gone by or whatever it was, and I'm down on my own. I thought I'll set up halfway along, and I must admit that first day I'd seen nothing until about midday. And the wind swung a little bit, and I'd taken a walk like 200 yards or so further up the bank, and that was where it all started to click. I saw a carp show, and when you've got grey skies, really grey water. When it wasn't just any old carp as well. It was a mid-30 and very coloured. It's she was. I judged maybe a little bit further than I could cast, but it wasn't at the area. We were at the area where the lake is narrowing significantly. So this is like, I didn't need telling twice. Super excited. Remember, you just come off of. If you see them on the 2 and 3, and you can get on them, there's a good chance of getting a bite. So you have the same kind of mindset. So quickly pack down the stuff, straight down there. And I think where I've been fishing earlier, I had like 2 rods out, and I was one messing around down the shelf. When I got down there and I'd seen this, it was like all in 3 rods out there. Now, that was it. I didn't see another show that day, and I didn't get a bite, okay? But it was still exciting enough to like, wow, I've seen one. It was almost in casting range. And I've relayed all that to Dave. Obviously, we're doing this as a team effort. He's done it. Now, fast forward the following week. Dave's down there midweek. I'm at work, get home, excited phone call from Dave. Not only he'd seen, I'm pretty sure it was Terry Dempsey who'd had an upper 20. Dave caught one as well, and he caught it from the area that I saw the show. So, what was brilliant about that is that if you think about it, we've barely blanked, just a couple of blanks in, and one of us has caught one on the toots. We weren't even like, I guess I should mention the rigs. Clearly these fish are living in a very big environment. We weren't thinking they were going to be riggy, and I don't think they are. It was all about getting a bait in front of them. So we were using exactly the kind of presentation that we did on the 2 and 3. A long nylon hook length, quite light. We were using 8 pound, relatively long hair, small sharp hook. The kind of rig that in our minds that even if it's silty and the lead falls in the salt, the bait's going to flutter down. And you're hoping they're going to come along, and by the time they've picked it up, they don't know. A bit more like match fishing, so it's not crude, it's quite subtle, and as they start to move, whack. They don't know anything's wrong until it's too late. Dave's got one. So all that thinking about, are we going to catch them in deep water? That's just gone. We're running with this now. And he's told me that on a Wednesday. Obviously, work's dragged by for the rest of the week because all you're thinking about is getting back down there.
Anyone else getting down there?
You would see, now bear in mind it is an expanse, so you think you'd be able to see all of it, but it's not really like that. Depending where you were, there's big bays. So you can be people hiding around. And in fact, as I'm about to touch on, a time when I thought I was on my own, I wasn't on my own. But there was not many.
Right.
I think the most I ever saw on a really busy day there was like a handful. So it's lightly fished, and that's the good thing, because there's so many other lakes on the complex, that have all got good fishing, and people, were not getting so drawn to there, even though that they really were good fish. Because I guess, if you, sometimes they're not just stories to put people off. It is challenging, but we're young and very, very keen. So I've fast forward to the Saturday. I obviously know exactly where I want to go. This is where sometimes fate and a little bit of luck comes in. The weather was good. It was a southwesterly again, so it's blowing straight up to the area that I've seen the show. Dave's caught the carp from. So all I want to do is make sure I get there. So I was probably one of those kind of guys that you've seen, the real keenies at the gate, waiting for the gate to open. Lucky you've got not too much competition over there, so bang, I got up there. Got 3 rods out. Didn't see anything. Unless my memory serves me, I think we did have mobile phones because I remember talking to Dave, and by midday, and I've got to say, so as much as he caught one, if I'd seen something, you naturally G's your confidence up, but I hadn't, and I'm looking, and it is a bit of it's a strange place to fish, depending on where you are, like, you know, there's expanses of concrete slab banks, so, you know, some shingle around. So I can only liken it really to being at the seaside, you know, that kind of constant waves coming
Lapping
in.
on the,
Because even if there's a light wind of that expanse of water, it's channeling up, you know, the length of the lake. Yeah, it's quite a chop on it. And also, and even making it more surreal, you're in, pretty much central London. So, you know, you've got, sirens going off, and White Hart Lane football ground is, I think it's within a mile. So I remember that day you were hearing a cheer go up. Again, it's all, a weird place to angle if your experiences before has been on some idyllic countryside lake. Yeah, this is very different. But, there are some very special carp living in this lake. So late afternoon, I'm right at the top of the bank deliberately. So I'm quite, I'm, I don't know, 15 yards or so away from my rods to be a little bit elevated so I can see more. And I remember with the wind, and it was a crosswind blowing up to this end I was. I'm watching the rods, and I was using Neville's. They're loud alarms, but I guess with that you forget how noisy it is up there. With the wind and what have you, and the water lapping around. And I'm watching barely hearing, but watching my middle rod, and the bobbin starts dropping down. So it was weird because it was the only take I ever got out there like that. Everything else was an absolute flyer. Like it makes you think it's a carp and nothing else. And this is, I'm thinking, well, maybe what you didn't naturally think is 100% a carp, or maybe I've caught a bream or something. So I come running down to the rods, leant into it, and any thought of it was a bream have gone straight away. Weird fight, not massive runs or anything, but maybe that's the nature of the beast. There's not a lot out there. Heavy, just heavy dead weight. But eventually, when it come to the shelf, and he kind of like, you're trying to bring the carp up, which I guess is somewhere near the bottom-ish. That's when I suddenly realised that, no, you're playing a very good carp, because when it met the shelf, it's got something to kind of fight against, and it's holding on. Yeah, very nervous. Because at that stage, while, Dave's got a bite relatively quickly, we still would been told, just how tough this is. This might be my one and only bite for the spring. If I lose it, no one would believe I ever got a bite. So I'll go real heart's flying. So eventually she's come up. You've got the big shot, and mate, I've stretched out. I might even got my feet wet a little bit, and I've got it in the nets. One look, I think my PB was like 31s, 32s from Darren. Looking at it, the shoulders of the fish, I only had a very quick look, because I'm thinking, like no self-take gear or anything. Then I've got to go and find someone. Secured the net. So she's safely in a bit, in a reasonable depth. I haven't unhooked it because I don't want it to, escape while I'm off. And as I've gone off down the bank, I'm heading in the direction of the maynards.
We've got a picture there, Tobe.
Yeah, let me have a look.
So I'm hoping that I can come across, somebody on the higher or the lower will come up. But actually, Danny Regan, a chap we'd met fishing the 2 and 3. He and his friend was in one of the bays. So thankfully they come up, and it was. The fish does have a real. I don't actually know if I actually sent you that one though. To be honest, that was the 36.
Oh, 36.
Yeah, I don't know if it was one of the ones I did send you, mate. I should have done that.
Hold fire, Tobe.
Because that might be, that could be a different. Because I'm going to explain what it looks like, and it might not. But anyway, it had a real look of Malins from Raisby. So if anybody knows what that carp looks like, quite a deep fish. The coloration and the general look of it. Yeah, really nice fish.
Yeah.
And by luck, and this was luck, because now if anybody catches one from the Lockwood, they try and get the towers in the background. So if anybody doesn't know what they look like,
and you did, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was but pure luck. It wasn't. It wasn't
okay.
deliberate. I mean, they're at quite, I guess, at a different time in our country's history, when they were building stuff like reservoirs, they. There was a certain flair to it, so they're kind of fairly ornate red brick towers.
It was a distinctive landmark, though.
Yeah,
wasn't
no,
it,
definitely. So that happens to be, and I'm pleased because I didn't even cross my mind to get that in the background, but it is, and I think it's the only one. So out the fish I caught out there, but the first one we got that in the background. So looking back, very happy with that. Yeah, obviously very, very excited, chuffed, really, really chuffed. But at that stage, we're not just thinking, we're going to catch, that could be it. But either way, you just really, really happy that you've challenged yourself, and this time it's come off. Because plenty of other times in angling I've done it, hasn't always worked quite like that.
So did you find with those fish then, once once you kind of got that location nailed, they were fairly easy to locate?
Oh, not really, because I'll tell you for why. Because it depended on So I'm obviously limited to the weekend at this stage. So if you don't get good weather, you just didn't see them.
Yeah.
And also, like, I had days down there, or to put it into perspective, so we're early April, yeah? I never got another bite in April.
Was there weather that you were waiting for, that you knew if that weather came in, that's where they were going to...
Because you were day fishing, like, we were kind of thinking if you got the low pressure, the cloud cover days, then you've got more chances of them going down in deeper water. So for sure, yes.
And being on the end of the winds.
Well, that was the interesting bit. They didn't always do what you think they were going to do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sent you over a picture where you can see my rods, and I'm on the southerly end of the Lockwood, right on the back of a big southerly.
Yeah.
Because that day, I remember that day clearly.
Put that up, Tobe. Just a picture of the lake on there.
Yeah, there was a situation where we'd fished multiple swims, and we did that many times, like, because you couldn't always find them, so you're trying to stumble on them. And we turned up at the lake, and there was at the southerly end there was a couple of bird tables, and I think there'd been a shown. But anyway, Dave saw that, he fished between them, and that
there
day
it is on TV for you.
Yeah, so there you go. So there's you can just make
pretty
out
awesome expanse of water. That
is, and you know what? I don't think my camera's quite giving you a wide enough angle to actually see the full amount of it. So yeah, you're right on the southerly end. The end where I caught the 36 is 3/4 of a mile away, and as you can see on the left there where that pylon is, that's going into a bay on what we call the natural bank. And then there's also a bay on the right. So yeah, like out there in the middle, as it were, is 400 yards wide.
That's the entire lake there, Aaron, is it?
Yeah, you can just pick out. You see those bird tables that I was just about to mention.
Yeah.
So we'd seen some action there. I think that Dave had got a couple of bites. It had gone really quick, which is really good going. Yeah, they were big 20s. It all went quiet, no more shows. We'd moved right to the other end to see, like, obviously there was some fish on the back. Is there some fish on there wasn't? Ended up coming back, and just to the right of it here is the bottom tower, and I'd seen one. So we're much later now. Look at the foliage. This is definitely May. I caught a 20. So it was a really nice a day up there where we both had action. But I'm kind of demonstrated. We'd fished on the back of it, on the wind, and for whatever reason, that day they weren't on the end of the wind.
Right.
Yeah, so typical carp. They don't always do exactly what the textbook would make you think. So yeah, you had to have your eyes open, and just because it's a lovely southerly or southwesterly, they weren't always on it.
Yeah, sorry, did you find unfortunately you didn't fish it in the winter, but those type of lakes tend to, when you've got those like big dam walls at the end and you've got those big southwesterlies coming in the winter with the low pressure, where I've fished, I've always noticed that they really do, they're quite predictable in those conditions. But I suppose on Lockwood, did you never get a chance to see that?
No, well, the only thing that would make me a little bit, well, if I went back there now and tried to because there were some nice fish there now, but if I went and tried to fish it, well, I wouldn't gun for the winter. I mean, it would be very cool to catch one out of the Lockwood in the winter, but you're trying to make it now as hard as you possibly can. When you've got that kind of depth, the question is, and the carp's metabolism is that much slower, do you know what I mean? They're eating less, moving less. What depth are they going to be sitting at? You've got to be there. I would imagine on the winter, you've got to be there on a really good weather day. One of those big winds, maybe, causing them to movement. Maybe one of them does
moving them around.
Yeah, exactly. But whether or not they're going to be on the end of a wind then, I would guess probably not, because of undertows and stuff like that. I mean, I imagine it's quite uncomfortable for a fish on an expanse like that. But that would be, I'd be guessing to a degree there, because I was there in the spring, and it's the other scenario, like they're getting more active as opposed to, activity decreasing.
Yeah. So you had another decent hit, didn't you? Did you have a 4-fish hit on there?
Yeah. Well, I think that what happened next after that is that when you went into May, we started to see some shows on the shelf, and it was very, very similar. Only some of those bites were even quicker. They were starting to come into the margin. There's still no real weed growth, and when you're in the closing as well, I should mention as well, is that you've got a 74-acre lake, one bank you can't fish. So you can't be there at night, and you can't fish the natural bank. So there are some real constraints here. All right, you wouldn't naturally think they're going to be on an easterly, but if it is blowing an easterly and they did want to follow it, well, they're on a bank you can't even be. Which is, again. So do you remember, like what I was saying, that if the weather's not right, you might be nowhere near them. So a couple of chances in the margin, and really for me, it all culminated in being there in, I want to say this was probably like mid-May. Dave and I are down there together, probably a Saturday, and just superb weather. Bit started off westerly-ish, then changed a little bit to southwesterly. So when we got down there, I think Terry Dempsey was fishing that day as well, and a couple of others. So it was probably one of the bit busier days. Probably good weather, people are seeing the same, thinking, limited to the days. This is a day when a bite could happen. So we've kind of initially we're fishing halfway along, and there's a few fish showing, so it's exciting. So you're already thinking, I've got half a chance here. So we've already both caught now. Totally confident in the approach, and these are the days that you want to be down there. That wind switched a little bit, and I'd already seen a fish that was within the range, I don't know, 20 odd 30 yards from where I had one of my rods. I was whacking them as far as I could into a westerly. So tackle's better now. It probably isn't that far out, I don't know, 80, 90s probably. I'd like to say it's further, but it probably, if you measured, it probably wasn't. So I'm already thinking, and remember, that you touched on earlier, there's that fine line. You can't just move for the sake of moving, just because the wind swaps a little bit. I've seen a fish relatively. You've got to know when to sit on your hands and when to move. So anyway, Dave had seen enough to move. I've given it another half an hour or so. I've walked down to where Dave is, and he's like, I don't know, 200, 300 yards further up the lake. I've only been in Dave's swim for a couple of minutes, and off to his right, 100 yards, I've seen one. Given, now you combined, bearing in mind, this is all happening 400 yards off to right now. There's no debate now. Straight back, pack the gear, going down. While I was, rebaiting, another carp has shown where I am now. And this was what was really excited. I've gone all in, so I've put all 3 rods, and that carp was in casting range, so I've got 3 rods all in the area that I've just seen a show, and after I got the rods in, so you've got the disturbance, so it's minimal disturbance, but you still are casting. I've gone and seen another 2 shows in the next 20-25 minutes, so you're really exciting. But
how rare was that then?
Well, I mean, we had seen shows, but maybe not as this. Probably the most activity. But remember, there's been a handful of times already when we've managed to see one. What has happened. The real days when it was.
Well, you got the depth of the water as well that you were talking about.
Yeah, and obviously but now we're not really kind of thinking like that. We're thinking if you're there in the right weather, we're not worrying about being in 30 foot of water. It's like, at that stage they're not eating plankton, dare I say it. They're showing us where they are, and we're working on the premise there's not one. If one of his mates has just dumped out, I'm hoping, there could be 5 or 10 below him. Because remember, this is a low stock lake. I don't think we're ever going to know exactly, but there wasn't 50 carp in the Lockwood. You're talking somewhere, depending on who you spoke to, 30, 40, that kind of amount. So a little bit of time's gone, but you're super. It is very exciting. You're there in the right weather, the rods are out, and they're showing when the rods are out. And then what happened next, I just didn't see it coming, but it literally went, left-hand rod's gone. And what was so crazy when I think back about this is there was always enough time to play the fish, photograph it, not to cast back out again before there was more action. So it literally went left-hand rod, 28, middle rod, 30, and then, one of the really special ones, the 3911.
We got that one, Tobe.
Yeah, that's the one that's quite a gnarly fish.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, real character. And I think some of the guys, I don't know if that had a name at the time or that come later, because I think on one side of her flank she's got almost like a H scale, and I think some used to call her H, but I think if I remember correctly, the names come afterwards. And yeah, they all, I should say, they were. I only had one bad fight out there, and that was later that day, and I'll tell you why. It was a poor fight in a second, but yeah, they all were really scrapping. Absolutely meltdown takes. They don't get caught very often. So, but I must say, the 39 put up a real good scrap. Thankfully Dave netted it when we did get the opportunity, and yeah, really.
And that was a surprise. That was a bit of a surprise, that fish.
Well, it wasn't
in terms of what was in the lake as well.
Well, the ones that we were, dead certain, it wasn't the sub, totally different looking fish, and it wasn't the Lockwood leather. And we'd seen a couple of other photographs that we were pretty sure were from the Lockwood but didn't say, judging by the background. You know, they weren't as obvious as the towers, and they were quite plain looking carp, but you know, we in our mind we were fishing for sort of 3 or 4 40s maybe. I think in retrospect there might have been more.
That looks bigger than that, Aaron, as well on that picture.
Yeah, I mean, she's when you think about it, she's quite a plump fish, isn't she? But they were not bait fish. I think that's probably just the time of year. She's probably a female, maybe carrying a bit of spawn, because, you know, you've caught them just at the right time in terms of weights. Yeah, and that wasn't it. Like, so I've got 3 under it from my belt that day, and you know, I think a couple of hours later it's rattled again, and that was the one that was a really weird fight. It was like kind of at range, it's hit the surface, and you basically just reeled it in. It as a very ugly carp with no tail. So at the other end of the scale, but still a lot.
I'd like to have seen that one actually.
Yeah,
a tailless carp. I mean, you can't imagine how they would fight, can you?
Well, he didn't.
It's just bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
You said it just fought on the surface.
Yeah, it didn't. It just, I don't presume a very bad case of fin rot or just deformed or whatever. But you know, just the root was there, but just no tail.
So you and David racked up a few fish then in quite a short period of time. Why did you stop fishing there?
Well, it wasn't an easy decision to make, but as it played out, it wouldn't have mattered if we'd decided to stay. Because the game plan, as I think I touched on, is that we had that dual ticket that we were going to go to the Warwick anyway, which is, again, a good lake in its own right. Low stocked, not quite as big, but known upper 30s. And so that was the plan, you know, and we kind of like, you know, I think by this stage, after that session, I caught one more. So I think I'm like up to 8. I want to say now, and maybe
that's a lot of fishing.
It wasn't what, you know. We didn't ever think that was going to happen, and Dave wasn't far behind. I think he'd like maybe hooked 7. I think, but Dave unfortunately had a loss and he'd landed 6. Just fate. I tended to have got some of the bigger ones, and that really is just luck, because you know you were location fishing. You weren't trying to single out bigger fish, but you know that plays out in different lanes. And when we went to a different venue, Dave was catching some of the special ones out there. So. As in answering the question, we'd had this plan, so we thought we'd stick to it anyway. Even if we hadn't, unbeknown to us, I think Thames Water had work to carry out on the Lockwood, so it was the end of the era anyway.
You timed that well.
Yeah, pure luck, and very disappointing really, because obviously we got an absolute taste for this. So at the very least, we would have been back next spring. You know, even if we hadn't replicated exactly the same, you know, you've got all that confidence, knowing that if you're there in the right weather, you know, you might not have got 8, but you might have got 2 or something. They could have been special ones. But yeah, it was drained. The fish were electro-fished. I think it was in the region of something like 25 got moved across. To the West Warwick. The sub and the Lockwood lever did go across. That fish up there that some people nicknamed the H, I think that was... there was some story about that was found beached or something and was moved to the higher or something like that, the higher Maynard, but yeah, and then ended up dying.
Right.
It's a bit sad, really, and you know, and I don't ever really know if they were all moved. There was a lot of whispers, and
there's a lot of water to be able to find every fish in the lake, though.
Yeah, well, they drained it significantly. You know, I mean, I think when at the time that they were electro fishing it, but you are right. Yeah, I mean, even if there's only, you know, 3 or 4 foot of water in the Lockwood, that's still a massive expanse.
Do you think any of those are still in there now?
We never ever saw any pictures of those fish that we knew about afterwards. Yeah, and like I said, there was a conjecture that maybe they didn't all go, but who knows, you know, what carp fishing's like, Chinese whispers and stuff. But all I do know for sure is that the very well-known ones, you know, like the sub and the Lockwood lever, ended up in the Warwick. So as it happened, you know, when we first went to the Warwick, you know, we were fishing there. We not exactly the same approach, because now you're in the teeth of the summer, so we'd switch back to the food bait, much more fishing in the margin. And yeah, the Warwick was a tough lake. You know, when you total up about the effort that we put on there, to put it in perspective, so we spent the rest of the season pretty much, I mean, sometimes, you know, like you might have flitted around a little bit, but it was my main water for out of doubt. And I think that by the end, I'd ended up with 10 fish from the Warwick, and David had I think it was like 13. So
and you ended up with the the Lockwood lever as
yeah,
well.
I did.
So
I did, and that was
a bit of a story there.
Yeah, well, it did. It felt a little bit strange. Obviously, clearly, I'd preferred if I'd been given the choice to catch her in an original home. But I suppose on the flip side, at least I was fishing for her, where she originally lived.
Was she coming out very often?
I think I was the first person to catch her when she got moved across.
So how long was that after?
I can't remember. I don't remember exactly how long they'd been in. But the sad bit is, I think they only lasted a season before they started to turn over. I think they're a subject we've touched on before. Old fish, you start moving them around, it's not good for them. Because I distinctly remember because there was a bit of a story to catching her. Like that day was autumn, so it was October time on the Warwick, and it was one of the days where they weren't showing, and I think it was the third swim move the first swim that I'd fished until we started to fight. We'd seen a show, and I'd managed to get on them, and it was an incredibly quick, I guess in some ways similarities to the Lockwood. But then again, remember, it's not the teeth of the summer where we'd been fishing in the margin and stuff like on the shelf. So you're moving more into the kind of colder weather. And yeah, I've managed to get on to showing third swim of the day onto showing fish. I think I cast out one rod. I'm casting out my middle rod. And we used to use back leads and try to get them as low down the shelf. So after I've kind of cast out, I'm taking the line. I'm trying to hold the line up higher to get the back lead down to the bottom of the shelf. To try and kind of be as covert as you can. As I'm doing that, I've got the line under tension, obviously, because all of these lakes, what's the Warwick, 30 plus acres, so, it's not a small lake either. You only need a little blow on these lakes, and there's a big chop plus undertow, so, you've got to have some tension in your line to try to get it in the direction of your mending line where you're fishing. So I'm pulling it, and it's come towards me a little bit, and my first reaction was like, oh, I've moved the lead. Because if I've ever moved the lead on a bottom bait like that, I'm thinking, the hook might be in a leaf, so I'm going to have to recast. As I thought that, the line started to come away from me. I was like, oh, man. And then I initially thought, you fear, like, have I foul hooked something because this has happened so quick? But I remembered I felt the lead down. So then I'm playing a carp, and that was her, yeah. So, and I ended up with 3 that day, which was a real, but bearing in mind, I've just said I caught 10 over the year. So that was a real red letter day as well. Like, I think I had a nice upper 20 just before we had to leave, and a really pretty 30 as well. Yeah. And she was, still one of my...
picture though.
Yeah, one of my...
Lockwood leather.
The favourite fish, a really good looking, if you wanted to think of it like a quintessential leather carp, I'd say she's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you actually, just going off a little bit, you were mentioning about leather carp actually, and there's a lot of
there it is.
Misinformation about, look at that. It is, isn't it? It's a perfect. So where were the scales on this one, on the top?
Yeah, I think she did, and that's the interesting bit. Look, I've got to be very careful what I say.
Don't worry.
Because there's better qualified people than I to
Absolutely.
mention this, and I would be going to Simon Scott. But I seem to recall that when they're genetic levers, there's one of the fins, they've got a different ray count, and that's the difference between, what we'd call a mirror carp and a genetic lever. But
the ray count being the amount of lines you can see on the
the rays within the fin, and the lever's got less. But I can't remember exactly what the number is, and I think there's a better person, as I said, to ask than me.
He's coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
so
we
will ask.
Yeah,
him.
I think it would be good, just for educating people, because for sure, I seem to remember she has got, and even some very famous levers, I think, might have everyone.
They've got scales on
them.
Yeah,
maybe not all. Clearly, you can get a totally nude leather.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think he'd be the man to give a definitive answer. Even if she is a mirror after all of that, she was known as the Lockwood leather. So to everybody,
no, I caught a leather out of Savay, which is a well-known leather, and I wasn't aware that it had great big scales across its back. So I saw it in the net and thought, great, I know which one I've got here. And then I thought, hang on a minute, it's got great big armadillo scales on its back, which is. Yeah, we will ask Simon about that anyway.
He's the man to give us a confirmation.
But it's interesting. Yeah. Lovely fish, that. Let's move on to toll pits, because we're talking about a completely different... Did you move from Walthamstow onto toll pits?
No, I didn't. I didn't fish the... Dave continued to fish the West Warwick, and I moved over to America to work over there for a bit in Chicago. So the following year, and it was a long story short, I was going over for a couple of years, and in the time that it was kind of being negotiated, I was going to go and work in Chicago. The firm got bought, And I definitely had a job at the firm that was buying us if I come back to London. It was a little bit uncertain. So you kind of like, I was with my now wife over there, so you've had like a kind of fun summer in Chicago, got to work a little bit on the Chicago Border Trade floor, and it's an exciting city. I sort of took the easy option to come back. And, I'm not going to lie, I'm a keen carp angler, so while I was over there, I wasn't fishing either. That wasn't, my career was very important to me, so that wasn't the deciding factor, but I'm not going to lie, it was a perk of coming back. So, no, I ended up fishing Sutton at home, and I did it in a very expensive way. I because I come back, had no tickets, there's obviously this waiting list and stuff like that, and if I'd known how tough Sutton can be in the winter, I would never have done this again. Because it was really expensive at the time. It's like they did a £500 CMEX gold card, and I spent that to only fish Sutton. So when you think of all the lakes they had, like Yateley Car Park,
there's a few.
Frimley full of good-looking commons and all that kind of stuff.
Take the hard option.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, Sutton's stunning carp, but it can shut up shop in the winter.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be as hard as it is, but it is a very pressured and tough lake.
Yeah, and the nature of obviously the night fishing ban on there, and having to turn up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go through all those gates.
Yeah, well, I still remember I didn't see that as a negative, because I looked at that as
survival of the fittest.
Well, it was more like it's still that level playing field bit, work's dictating that I can't be there on a Tuesday. So if I go to a lake where every day's a new start and somebody's not in the swim where you want, I looked at it as a positive. But you are right. I mean, the hours to day fish Sutton at home in Kent is painful. So that winter I chose not to do it. I got there about an hour before dark, and I left like an hour or so after dark. I was going out in the evenings and stuff like that. But I fished really hard. Like I did 41 days that first winter on Sutton. It's
not uncommon to hear people struggling on there for long periods of time, Aaron, either, is it?
It's a very, and it links in with toll pits, in that these small pressured venues are going to be some of the hardest venues around, because it is pressure, angling pressure. They're very scared, cautious maybe is a better word, to feed.
Yeah, that's why I was going to mention toll pits, because obviously on that lake you were getting very close to the fish at times. It was a clear pit and small, so. And you had a lot of anglers fishing on there, so it presented some different challenges for you.
Definitely. I mean, I think those toll fish are some of the most special ones around. You had some like really famous, good-looking old Cone Valley carp, like Plodders, Leicesters. They were 40s when I was there, and they got even bigger. Yes, it was after a very well-known good angler had written about him, Mr. Terry Hearn, and the lake was busy. But it was busy for a reason. They were very good-looking carp, and also a lot of the lakes in the Cone Valley, not all, but a lot of them are difficult to get the tickets. And at the time, you could join that club, and there was no waiting list, there was no restriction about where you lived. So you had people from all over the country come in there, because quality carp, and it was available. But I'd say the biggest thing that I took away from toll pits, and I'm pleased that I learnt that lesson there, was on Sutton you had to fish more on instinct, because there's a big bream population, or at least when I fished Sutton. And I did catch, I caught well that first winter, and then that was lucky enough to be the top rod. None of the real big ones, but I caught nonetheless some very special fish. You fast forward a few years to when I ended up going on, because I think it's like 2.5 years or something I spent on Sutton until we moved on to toll. You got to see them, so you could see the reaction to rigs. And your ability to learn when you can actually watch coming, because everybody can have an opinion, but let's have an opinion that's based on a fact. So you're learning you're learning much quicker and easier. So I think where it dawned on me is that my approach wasn't quite right. Was I can't remember how many blanks I'd done at that stage.
So how did you initially approach it?
Well, I did I got the ticket as soon as you could. So when we found out about where it was and where these fish were coming from, because at that stage, nobody's saying it's toll pits. They're talking about Hertz, Clubwater, or Cone Valley Lake, all this kind of stuff. So, the grapevine's gone round that it's Watford Piscators. We joined it as soon as, because you never know when they're going to change the rules about about when you get in. So you get in when you get your chance. So I had a couple of trips in the autumn. Nothing happened, but you get a feel for this is a tough lake. Speaking to some of the fellow anglers, a lot of blanking going on. I spoke to somebody on there who'd done 78 consecutive blanks on a tiny lake. Now, to set the scene, I think it was 15-ish mirrors and about the same again, the renegade commons that had escaped from a local lake. So in and around that, I'm roughly right, there's 30 carp in there. So it's hard for a reason, but 78 consecutive blanks. I mean, it's tough. So I initially, in the autumn, I'm fishing out a little bit. No luck. I don't even think I got close to a bite, to be honest with you. Come the summer, I'm doing what I think is the right thing to do. Yeah. I'm limited to how I can angle here because this is not when I'm up at the Lockwood when it's like me and Dave versus the fish. This is like me and Dave, because Dave was up there as well, versus 25 other anglers.
So was this the first time really when you've been fishing a lake with that much pressure?
No, Sutton was the same.
Was it?
Yeah, but Sutton was very busy, but not so bad in. Sutton had flurries, yeah. So in the autumn, when people are absolutely on it, it was very busy. At the back end of the season, everyone's having. But if you were in Sutton on a Saturday in December, it would probably be you and another couple of nutters. Do you know what I mean? It was relatively quiet because not a lot going on. I've been on Sutton before. I think we've just done one fish in December and stuff like that. You're up against it because it's days. You flip over to Talpits, you're talking quality carp and it's night fishing. I don't think there was a time restriction either. So. This is a busy, busy lake. So when I say I'm obviously going to try to find them in the edge in the summer, but you're more restricted. You can't I can't just choose where I want to go. You're having to slot in more. But one area lake really appealed to me. I would have liked it even more the year before because you got like what they called the railway snags, where you had a corner area. South facing again actually, so they like to sunbathe in it. Probably would have been a very good winter area as well. There was a tree and a rope going across it that the club had put in to stop people casting against the snakes. Ironically, I seem to remember people were wading and using roach poles to go under the rope anyway, so I'm not sure that it was really working, but either way it was there. They took the snag tree out, they left the rope. And I think that was a good thing because you could have cast down to that corner, so you could still use a pole to place your bait under there, but it stops the noise of repeatedly casting and stuff like that. So it's still an area that they would turn up in to sunbathe. It's a little bit covered, it's quiet. So that's where I could see him, and it was an area that I could kind of get. Yeah. So that's where I'm initially targeting. And that's the first time I got close to catching a carp, but definitely no cigar, and the realisation that my approach is wrong. I'm up a tree. I've got a bait poled under the margin. I think the day before I've had a few fish coming in. They didn't feed, but that was perfectly normal. That sounds crazy, doesn't it, saying fish in the margin, perfectly normal, and not fishing. They're pressured. Now, I'm not saying they didn't feed in that 24 hours, but it might have been 4 o'clock in the morning.
Was it everyone else fishing the margins?
No, there's a mixture. Early, this is still, I think this was May by now. So...
And you would have thought that Terry's book had really influenced people on.
There's a lot of good anglers there, though. But I mean, again, weather. Do you know what I mean? They're not like. Look, to be fair, I would see those carp appear later on in the morning. So by definition, they're probably somewhere else. So I don't think they were necessarily they weren't necessarily silly by being somewhere else. It was just about where you think. Look, if I could have done exactly what I wanted to do, I'd maybe fish in a deeper water spot and then moving into the corner. That would have been like Mac just couldn't do it. If you didn't go in that swim, it'd be gone, and that wasn't that opportunity. So a bit of everything. Some superb anglers were there when I was there, without a doubt. I've got a bait on the marginal shelf. I see them there the day before. They didn't feed. I'm hoping they're going to turn up because it was similar weather the next day, bit of sun. I'm up the tree in the morning. This probably was a Sunday morning, so I've done the Saturday night, yeah? I can see a common coming in. I'm not that excited, to be honest with you. Because it's one of the renegades, so it's not while we're there. It's not one of the big 30s, it's not Prololesses, it's a common that's 20-ish pound. But I'm already blanking, I'll take it and be happy, to get off the mark. And also I wasn't that excited because the day before they just didn't feed. But this one is coming on along the margin where it's coming on the line of where my trap is. I don't know why this fish did this, but rather than feed on a bunch of bait around what I've got, it's getting closer and closer to my hook baits, and it took it. Now at this stage, I'm thinking this is the first time I think I'd had a situation on Darren which was like this when it was caught, but I couldn't foresee my rig. So it's not like I've never seen a carp on my spot before, but I could actually see the rig. I am literally, bird's eye view directly above it, probably 12 foot, and this is all happening about 2 foot of water. So I can see my little bait, see the common getting closer, whatever. I expected it to, if it was going to feed, to start feeding around it. It didn't. It took it. Now, this was the kind of like, realisation moment when the pennies dropped. I'm thinking it's now going to shake its head and bolt off. And I was a bit nervous, actually, because I was using Fox XX alarms and no sounder box or anything, and they are turned up. And the bailiff there was quite strict. I'm not strictly off my rods, but they would moan, because someone's got a take and they're not on their rods and all this. So I'm thinking it's about to strange thoughts go through your thing. All this is happening, instantly. Like, oh, it's exciting. I'm just going to see the head shake. It's going to scream. She turned her head a little bit. I was never going to get a single bleep or anything like that. That was never going to happen because she never took the slack out the hook length. It wouldn't have mattered if I'd had a house brick for a weight to try to set the hook, because she turned a little bit, and quite naturally there was no fanning, anything, nothing like that. It was all, I can only describe it as natural, like akin to what I've seen in my pond at home. Like I've got a pond with some koi in there, and it's at times spending different fish over the years, but they're fairly sizable fish, like in and around 20. And you'll see them take the pellets they're being fed and then go and take a leaf. Doesn't look anything like a pellet, but they take it. You're thinking sometimes about how much intellect have they got, and then as they're swimming off, out it goes. They've decided with the receptors in their mouth, they don't have hands, it's not edible. And this is how I describe this. And to the day, I can't tell you what it was that told her that this is not something to eat. Is it the feel of the hook length? Have they detected the metal of the hook? Because the entire, bait and the hook was gone for a split second. Either way, she just ejected. And she was in that swim for about another hour and a half, just pottering around. Not where my rig was. Yeah, just not bothered. It wasn't like she was spooked or anything. And maybe there will be times when they get spooked, but it wasn't.
But you didn't prick her or anything, did you?
No,
There's no reason.
And that was the bit, and thankfully I come to the conclusion straight away, and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I caught quite a lot of carp at Sutton, but when I thought about my margin fishing on Sutton, because, Sutton I might be fishing in silt, where I might necessarily want a really short hook length because of presentation reasons, but I plenty of time fishing in the edge on hard bottoms on Sutton, and to see this, and my realisation was instant that how can I expect to hook the carp if I'm expecting the lead, because it's a bolt rig scenario, to hook the carp for me. There's no striking here, the lead's going to do it. So if she can get away with it like that, you're just giving her too much rope. So drastically shorten the hook length. And I think that hook length was something like, I don't know, in and around 10 inches, that's something like that. So I immediately, talked to Dave, well, this is what I've seen, and went down to 5 inches. I think, you can go short on that, and I have done. But at the time, remember, when you go from using a 10-inch hook length to a 5-inch hook length, it looks crazily short. Whereas now I've got the experience, if the bottom's really clear, I'd potentially go even
So an uncoated braided hook length?
It actually was a coated braided hook length with a bit stripped away.
Right.
So it wasn't... I did want, when it was, so it was relatively supple, and I did think to myself, because I know, and this is just my opinion here, it doesn't mean I'm right, but I know some people like the hook length to kick away. I didn't think like that, because I was now using a very short hook length. I don't know what direction the carp's going to come when it takes this bait, and I need some movement to get it in its mouth. Until you get the movement that it's going to get hooked. So I thought if the bait is anywhere near the lead, that's a positive. Because short hook length, I need some movement. Because look, you can hit a level. Imagine you try to use a 0.5 centimetre, it might not physically be able to,
Well, it's like a chod rig or something as well, isn't it?
Yes, and for sure the very short ones are working. Although I'd say it's slightly different because on a chod that hook is proud, isn't it? Like it's waiting as the carp.
It's popped up rather than It doesn't rely on being sucked up and got into position, does it? The same way. Yeah, but I mean, I think you're right to say it, because we shouldn't discount. There's a similarity there. Is I've caught, and generally when I use chod rigs, they're very low lying. So yeah, by definition, is it a hook length? Depending, even if it's popped up off your main line, it's a similar kind of thing. So that's what I did, and I think it was still a few more blanks until all the moons align. You're in the right swim at the right time. The same spot where that happened, slightly deeper water, but same swim, same scenario, and I got a bite on the short hook length, and that was a fish called the box, which was one of the real nice characters out there. And I think really, I would have liked to have caught more. I think I didn't catch loads of fish from Toll. I think I had 2 mirrors and 3 commons, so an awful lot of effort for not a lot. But it did teach me a lot. I'm really thankful for getting to see
the reaction to and our learning is something is, you might think, oh, maybe the length of your hook length, and there'll be people listening to this thinking that that's not the right conclusion, and that's fine. With carp fishing, there's more than different ways to go about it. And remember, I'm talking about if that bottom is very, very clean.
So that's influenced the way you fish in the future now after seeing.
For sure, yeah. And I've caught them substantially shorter, right the way down to 3 inches.
You use solid PVA bags very often?
I haven't, to be honest with you, but I did think to myself that could be part of the reason why they're so effective, because maybe people are not, the presentation's superb, yeah, for sure. So that's a massive benefit. But maybe people are almost like lucking into fishing with a very short hook length, and they're maybe thinking about that's a key bit. So yeah, I think it's a good method. And it's also, PVA bags are not just a small fish method either. I know people are, very good anglers have used them in big fish scenarios.
Why did not so many fish get caught out in the middle of that lake then? Why was traditionally the margins seem to be the better area?
I think that's. I'm not. I think we've got to be a little bit careful because we might be influenced from Terry Earn's writing.
So that wasn't necessarily true then.
No, I think it could have been timing. And I don't know enough. I have read Terry's books, but I can't remember exactly. I remember some of the margin fishing he was talking about, but I think it's right in saying that he would flick around. He wasn't at toll pitch like for a whole season, so we might be influenced by what he wrote about, thinking it's just like that. But I know of captures in open water. I had one myself.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I had a common on a tiger, and that was fishing into a bubbling area, like clear bubblers fishing in the silt. And I know plenty of other captures, including some winter captures that happened out. When I say plenty, obviously there's relatively speaking. So yeah, they didn't all get caught in the margin.
We were talking about the low water levels in the Colne Valley as well, weren't we? That influenced the fishing a few years.
Yeah, well, I think Dave and I kicked ourselves a little bit because by the time we'd had enough with, the M25, because I'm not getting a violin out, but when you drive it coming from, it's not like you live in the Colne Valley, and if you're lucky enough to do that, you don't have to contend with, the M25 and the pain that can be. Do you know what I mean? Even if we only live door to door an hour away, we both know from fishing, Savay, that your journey can be anything from the hour to 3 hours and even more at times. So we'd had enough and decided to fish elsewhere. I went to an estate lake in Essex that I'd heard whispers about. And yeah, during that time, the water level dropped. In particularly, it affected many lakes in the Colne Valley, but I know, they got caught a lot. I don't know if easy is the right word, but look,
it centralises the fish up a little bit more. So.
Yeah, for sure. That before, those fish could spend and did a lot of time in the right weather, in the margin, under trees, and if there were at times, even though that snag I mentioned were taken out, others come in, and they were in the edge a lot. So when you take the scenario out that the water dropped so much that they couldn't get in the trees anymore, then they're even more pressured. Like the fish can't blink, or when they're coming across a rig, nothing to hide. So yes, plodders and Leicesters got caught way more, but that's life, isn't it? You sod's law, for want of a better description. You're never always going to get your timing right. Like, had we fished it that year, maybe, and that would have been like more of like an open water capture. I don't doubt. And I think it was like it was like well into double figures, both plodders and Leicesters that year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they got hammered compared to what they normally would have done.
So following toll pitch, you fished Essex Manor and Golden Gate, Sutton. They were all in that sort of period anyway.
Yeah, I did. Yes, sometimes most lakes I would go to and stay, but there have been times when I've gone back for different reasons. Like I did go back to Sutton a little bit in 2008, and that's it's worth mentioning that because I went back with what I'd learnt at toll pits.
Right.
Fishing the same margin areas, and I believe in my mind those rigs mattered. So heavy legs, short hook lengths, because and also by that stage, I think it's worth touching on that. I was sharpening my own hooks, and I remember when people have been sharpening hooks for. I think if you go back to the start of carp fishing, some of when they were using sea hooks and stuff like that, there were guys sharpening hooks. So this is not a new phenomenon, but I guess like anything, it can become fashionable. But I remember when I'd first had a go at sharpening hooks, and I was just ruining perfectly good hooks.
So was I.
There was a definite skill to it, and when I become better at it is when I realised you need a vice, and it was the jag vice. When you've got that, real purchase, a proper purchase on that, and whilst the jag stones and violet are perfectly good, I remember somebody had mentioned a jeweller's file. I want to say it's like the Swiss jeweller's file, like Pillar 4 or something like that. Really good for removing the metal. So I got fairly good at that, and when you carp couple, heavy leads, short hook lengths, razor sharp hooks, because remember, when we're carp fishing, this is not like, when we're, float fishing for a roach or even like for a pike or something where, you get the bite indication and you're setting in the hook. We're relying, the sharpness of the hook is absolutely critical if you're fishing in that bolt ring shop, because the battle's all won or lost when they pick the rig up and hopefully move slightly and whack if you've got the sharp hook.
Absolutely. So what difference did you find on Sutton after that then?
Well, I think I did. I was generally fishing the mornings, and I think I ended up with, it was something like I went down there, I think it was 7 mornings and ended up with 8 carp, which is a lot.
So it made a difference.
For sure, I think it did. Like I said, I always want to, like, whenever we kind of come to conclusions in carp fishing, you have to be careful, because remember, I think I alluded to with the Walthamstow fishing, and when I first went to Sutton, I was using very long hook lengths out in the silt. So there can be different ways. And I've caught them. I've had catches out of January on 6 pound nylon hook lengths and half a boilie. Like, so the other end of the scale, more like a kind of a match approach where you're hoping a carp's going to pick it up and not detect there's anything wrong. But
would you ever count out going back to that sort of approach then, fishing really after what we've come to kind of accept nowadays?
I would. The makeup of the lake would dictate what I was going to do.
Would you scale down as much as you could then if you had the opportunity?
Okay, I have to say, when I think about like the opportunities I've had on Savay this year, I wince a little bit. If me of old had some of those opportunities, I might have been trying to catch those carp on way smaller hooks. So I might have got the bite still, but I could have ended up having hook pulls and, so I am a bit of a convert now. Like, I'm generally using bigger hooks. But I would never say never. Like, if I, because remember, like, I guess it's horses for courses. If you're dealing with weed and snags, you need proper tackle. You need to using like a stepped up size 4 hook, 20 pound mainline if casting's not a problem. Why not have the strongest and most abrasion resistance you can? And even, braid, on my, the Essex Manor I used a braid, and then on Horton, and in the right conditions, it's absolutely superb. You don't have to mess around with marker rods. You know exactly with the feel that you're getting. The feedback is direct to the rod. What the bottom is, is it gravel, crack if you're on it. Like a abrasion resistance with weed, it's superb. So answering the question depends what I'm fishing for and depending what's there. Walthamstow reservoirs, if there was no snags and no weed, then it's not a silly approach. And it worked. Remember, like I've had some times when there wasn't anybody doing better on a different rig. Do you know what I mean? It was like we were holding our own with what we were doing. But I'm pleased that I'm a bit of a convert now on, man's tackle, for want of a better a description, because when you're fishing for truly big fish, you need to be using the right gear, otherwise you're just going to lose them. Yeah,
and just going back to Sutton, so there's a chance that you will probably go back there in the future as well, isn't there? Possibly.
Well, I think that's a loaded question, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Sutton was one of the places where, I caught quite well. I think it was something like 32 or 33 carp, which depended on who you spoke to at the time, there was like 60, 70 fish in there, which again, it sounds like it should be easy, but anyone who's ever fished there will tell you it's not. But I didn't have any of the real big mirrors. I probably did lose 1 or 2 of them because I did, like I said, I alluded to, I was using quite, fine tackle. Do you know what I mean? So I think we're on borrowed time now, but there are still some of those special ones alive. As we speak, I think the fully's still swimming about, and it's an absolutely awesome carp. And I've seen her get caught in January, and it's a really lovely carp. So I don't know whether I would or not, but I would love to have had one of them. So out of those 30 odd carp, I caught 30s, but I didn't get.
I don't know. You sold it quite well to me the other day, actually, Sutton. I mean, it's quite a convenient place to fish as well, isn't it? If you've got limited time.
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful. We're going to be annoying a few people, but they're fishing. But I believe it's still days only, and I think I'm probably right in saying this. Anywhere that is days only is always going to be a bit quieter, because I think your average carp angler and there's nothing wrong with this, that, that they might have been working all week and they want to go fishing and they're liking their whole idea of, sticking the bivvy up, having a couple of beers and angling as well, enjoying themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sutton's a little bit more grafting. But I would say if you've got very limited time, those kind of places are good. Yeah, they're hard, but, that time that you've got, you can kind of make it pay. I mean, imagine, short evening sessions in the autumn on Sutton.
Yeah, no one says it's going to be easy, but
you'd be there at the right time.
You intensify your angling a bit more. When you're fishing those sort of places with limited time, I think.
I think you are right.
Should we move on to Horton? I know we've skipped a few years, but last year, last season, you decided to have a go on there.
Yeah, I guess I was definitely influenced by Dave. I think he'd had a go. I think we both said it would be nice to have a go on one of these waters that is I guess, look, when you go back 20 years ago, if you were fishing for a big carp, they were generally in low stock venues. And now, here we are, there are, many lakes across the UK now that have got crazy heads of big fish. And it just gets tempting to go and have a go. And, Horton was one of them, the Manories as well. And now you've got places like, is it
Grenville?
Yes, which is producing fish on an even bigger scale, sort of almost like super lakes in terms of the weight and concentration of big fish. So yeah, Dave went over there, did really well. So I thought, I'll go and have a go. And also, there's a kicker as well for Horton. I don't want to say, I want to be honest, because anyone who says they're going to Horton for this reason, I'm not sure that's true. But it is nice that there are some special old ones as well. So you've kind of got the Fisher Ponds fish, Simos, whatever you want to call them, that went in 98 after unfortunately there was a fish kill on Horton. They're the real big girls. Plenty of those. I think there's people probably think there's more than there is. What's, I guess, good or bad at Horton, there's not many secrets. When you go in the clubhouse, they know exactly what's in the lake. It's all when something's captured, it's all documented. I think there's something like 20 odd Fisher Ponds fish, but obviously a higher proportion of those at the right time of year are over 40 pounds, and some of them are even bigger, they're up to 53, 54, that kind of weight. Plus, some real survivors and amazing carp that have fished like the wood carving that managed to survive being moved lake, sometimes even more than once. Survived fish kills that wiped out all their.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we assumed at the time, didn't we, when those fish were moved from Foxpool to Horton, that we're just moving from one lake to the next, and But I mean, that's potentially quite a stressful experience for fish, and you shouldn't really take that for granted.
No, I think from what I've seen, and I think this is right saying, I'll apologise if I am wrong. I think when they initially moved in, they got caught easier than they did in their old environments.
Yeah.
From my understanding, the likes of between what you want to call it, Foxpool or Longfield, were super hard lakes. Like the guys who caught out of there back in the day, this was really grafting for some amazing carp. Like when you had the likes of Jack living in there at 40 plus, I guess in the 80s. So when they got moved in, I think there was a period of time where, in comparison, they come out a lot more. I think it does stress them out.
But those fish, they seem to adapt to Horton quite well, didn't they?
Well, I think they flourished. I think if you put aside that initial period where, remember, I never fished it then. I fished it way later. But I think the weights got way bigger than they did in their previous environments. So yes, they definitely flourished. But then there was an unfortunate fish kill, and the lake had to be restocked in the late 90s. But yeah, there is still, what is there like? We mentioned the wood carving, an amazing, not just an old carp and a special carp, but an amazing looking one as well. That is an upper 30 and a real survivor. Black tail that can be the same kind of weight. There's the Fort Park leaning, not a longfield, but still a special carp, and a bunch of longfield commons that are just as amazing as well, that can be mid to maybe even upper 30s.
So you had a good selection of. Different age and different size fish.
Yeah, I'd say a sprinkling, but you're really going there for the big fish upon ones, and if they come along, brilliant.
So I mean, did it kind of live up to expectations when you fished there? I mean, did the Did the busyness of the lake surprise you? Did you know what you were going to be confronted with on there?
They're all fair questions, and obviously Dave had only been there 18 months or 2 years before, whatever it was, because I think Dave had the ticket longer, but he didn't really fish it the second year. So, I knew it was going to be busy. But you still got, if you go to, sometimes even when you know somewhere's going to be busy, there is still the shock of the reality. But yeah, there are a real concentration of big fish, and I think sometimes there can be the perception of that kind of fishing is, I don't know if easy is the right word, but maybe, I don't know if people realise that, they're in there, but you've got an awful lot of competition to try and catch them. So yes, it was super busy. Yeah.
So did you go on there with a preconceived idea about how you wanted to fish it based on maybe what Dave was doing previously?
Well, he did, I think Dave wouldn't mind if I said that, say this, he tends to apply bait and try to get them going. I've never really been like that. Probably maybe I was probably wrong in a way, because I used to think if you're only going once a week, you're never really going to get them switched on to whatever bait. And if I go and introduce bait when I go and I'm not coming back for a week, I'm thinking, somebody else is just going to end up fishing over that, and I'm not really getting the benefit from. But I did learn on a lake later on is that you can establish bait on a lake even going there once a week. So sometimes I've been wrong, and again I like to think through angling and experience you evolve, and sometimes I could be wrong, and learn. So I wasn't thinking I'd try to apply the bait like Dave did. I've got a bit of an edge already, I suppose, that the bait firm that I'm confident in I use, Mainline, a lot of that had gone in. I mean Greg, one of Dave's friends, had put a lot of bait in before Dave had even gone there. And Dave, obviously we're not the only ones using Mainline. So, and there's all kinds of bait going in the lake, good quality bait companies. So it's competitive even from that. So answering the question, yes, Dave had obviously had all the war stories of all the stuff that I didn't think it would play out the same way. So I'm never bothered about Dave loves spot fishing. He had some. I remember he was telling me about swims like the Salt Circle where he loved this spot at X-Rats. But if I'm honest, I think he just fished them well at the right time and gave them a bait they wanted. You know what I mean? So I think I was probably right to have that mindset, i.e. just to fish it for myself, because it played out differently, and lakes normally do. No two season is normally the same. Like, for instance, when Dave fished there, the Church Bay was chock-a-block with weed. And he really struggled to get in that area. The carp spent so much time there. Yet my season on there, yes, some of the real old ones did get on the back of there's some overhanging trees, not snags because they keep the snag streams, but they still come right up the marginal shelf. But because it never had the weed beds in the bay like it did when he was there, they didn't hold there. So I'm not saying they didn't come in. Plenty of people did have opportunities there, but I never felt like they were held as much as you had two main other areas of weed, like the weedy bay. So I'm fast forwarding from the spring to the summer now, but when the weed come up, there's the area called the Weedy Bay where there was a lot of ribbonweed, and also the Dog Kennel Bay at the other end of the lake had far the most amount of weed. So funny enough, that was the main draw.
So methods-wise and tactics were based around being able to fish effectively around.
Well, I guess I was quite lucky because whenever lake you go to, you always feel, well, I guess it's a pressure you put on yourself that you always want to get one under your belt. And I was really lucky on Horton. I mean, the first time I got there, almost every swim on the lake was taken. I think it was about 3 days into the season. And as I was walking along an area, so even when I pulled into the car park, I was the weather conditions, it's early April, I want to try and be somewhere central. I don't want to be in a bay or somewhere like that. I want to be fishing somewhere out. This is superb carp fishing weather. I think it was a light westerly, overcast. And also, one thing I had remembered that Dave said is, particularly the spring, they're daytime bites. Now, clearly, when I say something like that, the key bit is the spring. When you move into different seasons, quite often the bite time changes. So when I'm there, I'm obviously you want to. I'm not put it like this. I'm not about to get my mark rod out and try to scare any fish around if I manage to get a swim. And this is where sometimes fate can play in. As I'm coming along, one of the areas that I would have liked to got into, the guy was packing up. I'm always very careful when you approach the situation, because I know you don't want people coming up to, when are you going, mate, and all that kind of pressure. So I literally it happened to be a swim next door to him, but they were so tight. I think the way it is, like the left hand and the right hand pallets. And I said to him, is the etiquette that if one's fish, you don't fish the other? Because I didn't want to go in there, like, you know. And he said he was another new member as well, like so. But he said I'm going. He hadn't caught anything, but I'm never really that bothered, because I always kind of feel like, yeah, okay, like, I mean, that would confirm there's something there. But I feel like if that's how you fish, you're always trying to chase what's already happened. So I'd rather, like, you know, and that's not always going to be right. Sometimes they will hold up in areas, and information about captures can hold up. But that's my mindset anyway. So I'm not bothered that he hasn't caught one. I'm just looking at the weather. It's brilliant for open water. And, this is where I guess, like, all the moons aligned. I quickly got my rods out. I did have to spot because there are seagulls. I'm only mentioning that because there was a bit of disturbance. I didn't put loads of bait out there. I knew the lake was weedy because of all the conversations that I'd had with Dave. I went down there. I thought in the spring, I'm going to just make sure I've got rigs that can fish. I like the chod in the right scenario, and I knew that there was plenty of low-lying weed on the lake. So I forewarned is forearmed, turned up with those rigs, put the rods out. I'm in the deep water, first time using braid for over 10 years. The feel you got, I mean, this lake's, most of it's quite deep, or at least the open water areas. Like, I'm thinking, wow, this is taking forever to fall down. And when it settled down, obviously, you're getting that kind of sensation where not thumping like it's a gravel, but firm enough that there's a little bit of weed. And when I had a miscast and reeled in, there's a bit, but not on a chod. I'm going to get a bite, like if there's a fish to be had. So I've done that, put a bit of bait out. I'd like to break the bait down if I can, if there's a weed about, so it'll kind of flutter down and is more presentable. If you put out whole boilies and there's weed around in the bottom, I'm not saying carp can't find it, but it's not going to be as visible as it falls between the weeds. So I've done all that, and this is where sometimes you do get lucky. I've seen a carp, right, that was probably 5 or 10 yards behind me about an hour later. So, I just had all right, I hadn't had many casts. It probably took me like 3 casts to get, it's only 2 rods to get to where I wanted to. One just to make sure I've reeled in one of them, just to say what the bottom was like. I've the braids and the travelling through the waters told me everything about this is where I want to be in these kind of conditions. Yes, I've spotted, but I've seemingly got away with it. And I think it was only an hour or so later. I've got a very violent take. One thing about braid, if you haven't used it before, I haven't used it for a while, the takes are violence. Because obviously, clearly I'm stating the obvious, but there's no line stretch. So anything that's happening at, 8 yards out in the lake or wherever you happen to be fishing is exactly replaying. So it had me convinced the early part of the fight that they'd put some stockies in. I can't remember exactly how many. Very small fish, to be honest with you, like 6 and 8 pounders. Like, it's not fish that you're after. And the rod was jerking and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, I've got a stockie. Well, all it was is that I'm feeling the exact head shake. What turned out was a much bigger carp, because as the fight's developed and I've got it much closer, and you're getting, suddenly it's dawned on me this is anything but a stocky. It's keeping down. When I've eventually got it, the pallets have got like stagings out, so you're quite reasonable out into the lake, so you're having a deep water fight straight away, and the fish is boiling. There's bubbles appearing as she's whacking the bottom. When she's eventually tired and I've netted her, it was one of the big ones. So I've had a mid-40 as my first bite out there. I did have a chuckle with Dave. I mean, obviously that's what you were there for, but you've had a slice of good fortune to hit the ground running. And the spring was super busy, and I had other opportunities. I'm not going to say it was enjoyable, because if you like angling, like finding them and stuff like that, this is more like slotting in. And it doesn't matter, even though I've had a bit more flexibility recently, like I could go and fish the Tuesday night because that's when the best weather is. That doesn't mean Horton's going to be quiet, not at all, not in the spring.
So was your fishing evolving then as well? The way were you still fishing into weed and fishing chods and stuff?
For that initially, I think the first 5 or 6 fish I had from open water was like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Do you know what I mean? So I carried on, like I said, ultra sharp hooks, a lot will pop up. I said I like to use a low line chod, so it's quite a, and I'm not saying 3 inches won't work, but to me it's quite subtle. And when you watch carp feed, from what I've seen over the years, that they're creating that suction, near, very near the bottom, if not on it. Obviously they feed on weed as well. But so that's why I like a low line shod, a very short hook length, for want of a better description. So that was working for me. But remember, nowhere was actually clean. Like I wasn't casting out and fishing areas where it was cracking down or reeling in, and even when you'd reel in, if you'd not caught one, there'd be a little bit of weed. Not like it wasn't presented, but the bottom wasn't crystal clear. So I was happy with what I was doing. And where I really changed is obviously everything I'd learned about when I had the opportunities to fish in the margin. So if you now kind of fast forward on the spring and come as soon as like the exciting time, thankfully Horton got quieter. I suppose a positive of the way it's structured down there is that the ticket allows you to fish other lakes, and it almost felt like at the start there were people fishing Horton who, I don't know, or even chancing their arm, almost like buying a lottery ticket. It's like they were never going to fish that lake, and they're going to fish one of the other ones, because it isn't a pushover. I'm not saying it's not Yateley car park back in the day, clearly, but they don't crawl up the bank either. You've got to be fishing well to consistently catch and deal with the angling pressure. And if you think you can bait a swim and keep going back in there, it's a pipe dream.
It's not, yeah.
No, you'd have people in there immediately. You've got to be constantly absolutely on it. As soon as I could start kind of sight fishing in the margin, I've gone back to, generally speaking, the approach before. But I do have one glaring memory where, if anybody thinks like a bottom bait versus a pop-up doesn't matter, I mean, there are times when, again, it depends. Remember, this is about pressure fish, I should say. We're not talking about the Lockwood where it was location was everything, and they're not finding a rig every 30 seconds. As a carp swims by Horton, there might be 20 plus anglers on there, even more. They're coming across rigs and baits all the time. So this particular day, so we're in the summer now, I've turned up at the lake, and the first thing I'm always going to scout around. What can you find? Yeah. So I'm checking. I've checked the weedy bay, and I think by this stage I'd had a bit of action in there, and I think, from memory, on that time it was taken, which was a bit gutting, because in that condition I knew a few fish would turn up there. So I've carried on up the lake. I've come round what they call the dog kennel bay, where you've got one swim called the Royal Box, and there's some high ground there where you can look down on the lake. There's some fish here, like big girls as well, but they are swimming over the ribbon weed in, I don't know, that weed is growing in deep water. So like when you see something like that, seeing the carp and catching it is two different things. I mean, and where they were, okay, you could have had a go on the surface, but I would have think your chances of landing that carp would be fairly remote. So I'm kind of thinking not where's the surface opportunity, I'm thinking where can I find something in the edge. That's me anyway. So as I've come further along, there's a gap. Like, it's not a place where you can fish, but where you can observe a shelf, which is probably, I don't know, between 5 and 10 yards from where these carp are. So near enough that I'm thinking a few of them will kind of drift over. So, have a quick look around, nobody's about. I mean, you're allowed to sneak in a little bit of bait, but you just, you want to be blatantly, obviously, throwing bait in a spot. So I've put a few broken baits there, and I've carried on my way around the lake, thinking I'll check that later. And I've come into the bay that I mentioned earlier, into the church bay, and under the overhangs, and wow. And that area is particularly exciting because one carp called the wood carving that I would have loved to have had. I never had her, but it's a really good looking carp. And I didn't see her that day under there, but she's known, say she gets caught 4 times a year or whatever, then half of those catches are going to be under there. You are narrowing the odds of catching her from there. So I've gone round there, crept in, I think I counted 12 carp. All from various depths. From as it starts to shelve off, I saw a couple go along the shelf that were in sort of 3-4s to right up on the shelf. The trouble was the time's ticking now. This is midday, and the long story short, not my finest hour. Didn't make the best of it. I think when that kind of opportunity happens, you need them to sort of move out a little bit to get the rig in and then get a bit of bait in. And when you had so many, that just wasn't happening. So in the end, I've chanced my arm actually, half coast clear, not fully. And, I guess I got sus. Either way, didn't get a bite. Real missed opportunity. I've then thought, right, do I want to be here? in the darkness, because I remember that the lake is not the spring now, it's a bit quieter. You know, there could be opportunities where like I'm thinking this is not where I'm going to get a bite in the early hours of the morning, or at least that's how my mind works. And I thought I'd rather chance my arm somewhere else on fish and then come back the next day because it's a bit quieter. I've packed up the gear, gone back round, and I've approached the margin where I've thrown the bait. You're always creeping up in those kind of situations. In case of it, I don't know that they're going to be. When I've looked over, there's a common that I judged to be about 30 pounds, and then there's another common that was a mid-20. I now know for sure, because I ended up, catching the bigger one of them, is that was the a fish known as the loner, and the other one, I'm not sure exactly which one it is, but almost certainly it was a longfill common. Now, I think I'd got roughly an hour before it's dark. They're on the spot and they're feeding. Your first thing is you're kicking yourself, thinking, like you always want to be, don't you, fishing wherever you are, well, weren't, sorry. So I thought, right, I had the rod set up. I had 2 rigs. One of them was a chod, I think, from the previous session, when I'd been fishing, I might have been fishing out somewhere. And the other one's a short hook length and a heavy leg, like how I would present in the margin if I could in this kind of scenario. But this spot is not it's not pristinely clear. There was little patches of clear gravel and then some low line weed, but weed. And I'm thinking, if I put this, I might have even had a 5-ounce lead on, but if I'd got that there with this short hook length and I land in that weed, it's just going to be like the rig's going to be hung up. So I thought, this is, a rushed opportunity. Like, put the chod in. Bear in mind, I've already had like 6 fish. I'm not thinking, this is not going to work. Anyway, they disappeared. I've sprinted around the other side. Well, it's backed off initially and then shuffled around there as quickly as I can to the other bank. And imagine like we've got like a corner here. So this is the Dog Kennel Bay. I'm in the swim that kind of can cast a little bit across to it. I'd like to say I got it there the first time. I didn't. But thankfully, the second cast, so the first one was just like to stop it. It was clearly going to go up, into the brambles. The second cast, I know I'm on the shelf. I scooted straight round there with a handful of bait, and I'm now going to just sprinkle some broken baits, not over the rig, but scattered around the area. I want these carp to come back and be moving around, because in my mind, if I get them moving around, he picks up a bait and then he's got to move again, and that's how I'm going to hook him. The downside was, when I got round there, the bloody chod is laying in the clear area. But I'm still thinking, it's not the end of the world, do you know what I mean? Like, I've managed to get the rig in without spooking them. Hopefully they're going to drift back. And, like I said, it's only like, I think there's less than an inch of material. So, I'm not thinking that they're just going to ignore it. The long story short, so with the remaining hour of light, they come back, they fed all over the spots, seemed very confident, because like I said, been there earlier, didn't even seem to notice the rig. At times, the bigger of the common was inches away from the pop-up. Not once did one of them try to take it. It was like they just ignored it. It was like they were happy feeding on the bait that was hard on the deck, and I just thought, wow, look, like I said, they're very pressured carp. But they're not being necessarily super cute, are they? They're just feeding the way they want to feed, and if you're presenting something higher up above where they want to be feeding from, they're not going to pick it up, scenario, are they? In that scenario, it was a glare. I just thought to myself, if I had a bottom bait in that scenario, that it would have gone. Right. And the reason why I can have some element of conclusion to this is that the following week there was fish down there. I had them drifting around. They're not all going to be the same fish, but there was the 30 common, and I went and caught it. It was the one called the loner, from the spot, just into the hours of darkness. I never got to see her take it, because I'm in my swim, and I think the bite was like, midnight or something. She was nailed on, and this time I had more time to make sure you had the right rig and land in the short area, short hook length, sharp hook, heavy lead, and she was nailed. You see that quite a few times, don't you? It's bottom baits. I think when I was younger and being in situations fishing over particle especially, and using pop-ups over the top and not getting bites, then when it's quite early on when I started fishing and realising that you need to get a bait on the bottom. It's when I think about like the Essex Manor, I was fishing over margins that had blanket weed all over the show. So I did really well in the summer. The rig worked perfectly fine, where I was, like a critically balanced, pop up on a relatively long hook length. So I guess it's about, adapting to whatever the situation is and having it in the right rig at the right time. And I think when I look back at the season on the Horton, you know, I was fishing different areas of the lake. I think I managed to catch many different areas. I don't even know if I caught a fish from the same swim as Dave. So even with all that information, he caught really well, but just different year, different scenarios. You know, I went from the chod initially. When I had, you know, in the early autumn, just to the right of where those margin opportunities are is a swim called the Royal Box, where you can a really nice depth. It's sort of like 8 or 9 foot in front of like dense weed, and wow, like I had some electric sessions when they were there. And like when you've got big carp showing at very.
Is this winter time?
No, this is early autumn.
Right.
So yeah, just when the weather's changing. So first sort of leaf fall. And yeah, that bottom wasn't crystal clear. So I guess, you know, what I'm trying to say is I didn't just think, well, I'm never going to use a pop-up again. That's not, but I just felt like, for pressured fish in that side, just glaringly tell you, you know, it needs, you know, they're probably too cute for that. So no, in that scenario, you know, in the area there, which including some of the captures of the real big ones in Horton, that was all like what I'd call like a reverse combi. So, you know, you've got the shape of the chod, which I think is great for if they do take it, like, you know, trying to get a hook hold, but a bit more movement in the hook length, because when I was underarming it with the braid, I'm not getting firm drops. It's not like it's just, that's clean silt. And then as the season wore on, then I went over to slightly longer hook lengths out because it wasn't crystal clear, but it wasn't weedy enough that I needed a pop-up, and it was basically critically balanced rigs. And
you went on to catch a lot of fish out of there. You have, what was it, 14 fish over 40 pounds or something?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, some of the, I mean, look, they're in there to be caught. Yeah, so I think one thing I would like to say is I don't. I think, you know, and I'm certainly not about to boast about how many big fish you caught out of Horton, because to me, like, they are in that lake. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that means more than if a guy is on a lake and he might have 1 or 2 special ones in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it is more impressive. I mean, I guess what you try to be is on somewhere like Horton is consistent. Like, do you know what I mean? You're catching them in, over the course of the season. So that's what I was really proud about. Like, whether or not it was the edge or different swims, and no matter how busy the lake was, I managed to, keep going. But I think sometimes it can be like little things can have a real, can change events. And I mean, I remember. When you moved more into November, the lake had a quiet spell. Like, so over a period of a couple of weeks, not a lot had been out. And Dave said, I'll go and have a go in that salt circle. And I think I fished it in the summer, but in the margin, and I'd had an opportunity out there. And he was telling me about, I think I mentioned earlier, about like a gravel feature out. And I found it, and it was a lovely feature, you know, like, yeah. Clearly, I'm going to put a bottom bait on it. It's cracking down, you know, as the lead's landing on it. And that night, I remember Horton was particularly quiet. Like, it had done some action on the I think there'd been like a fish out 2 or 3 days before from the lodge end. So I think there were 3 other guys on, and they were all down there, and I'm in the salt circle. Hadn't seen anything, you know, my walk round, nothing to go on. So that's why in the end I've gone, you know, Dave said, have a go in there. Like, I'd still say before, like, I feel like it's a good area, but I think like maybe bait had brought them there. So anyway, I'm having a cup of tea, and it's one of those nights when it is still, like, it's absolutely, like, you know, just... Horton's never peaceful because of the plains, yeah. So it's not serene, but it's still. If there's going to be a show, you're not going to miss it. And anyway, off to my left, just before dusk, a show, an unmistakable good fish. I've literally, you know, I've got the tea in my hand. It's gone flying, and probably shouldn't say this is a bailiff's listening, but I'm fishing Oakmoor anyway. I've gone running off down the bait. There's no one down there. I wanted to see where it was, and it was between a swim called Captors, which is a very well-known and a popular swim with a gravel feature in front of it. And I think the next door is called like Phil's Dugout or something like that. Dugout. It's a swim to the right between the two of them. And I'm like, should I go and move straight away? Because I've seen one now. But, you know, I'm sitting there, maybe a little bit lazy, who knows, but I'm sitting thinking I've got my rigs out totally perfect and no one's down there. So maybe, I'm thinking, have they seen these? Because remember, it's not busy at the moment. It doesn't mean someone's not going to move, yeah? So I thought, I'll fish the night and then move down there in the morning. So if I blanked, I did blank. I moved down there, caught 2. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is most people, I ended up fishing captors, the popular one, rather than one next door. Because I thought, if I go on the one next door, Horton can be so busy at times, someone will go in captor. So you're being a little bit tactical. But what was really interesting about this is that it wasn't where I caught our captors. I didn't catch from the gravel features. I was catching from the silt off to the left. And why that's significant, because it's an area of the lake you can also reach from the far bank. Because remember, when you're fishing somewhere like Horton, you're not going to keep getting into the same areas. And it was that sighting that took me to this area that led to a series of big fishing. And then it culminated in December and January. And I think there's another thing, what strikes me, what is interesting, how because the weather had tended to be generally mildish, we did have some cold weather, but it was short and sharp, not prolonged. They kept feeding. Categorically, because one of the recaptures I had like a fish called the Little Lever, really nice fish, and I'd had her at, I don't know, it was like upper 30s, and then when I recaptured her again in December, that was like, I don't know, early November, or mid-November, when I recaptured her again in December, she was up over £1 pound. So categorically they were feeding. And I was just steadily catching, and then I managed to be down there in some good weather. And one session I think I'll struggle to repeat, where I was lucky enough to have a brace of 40s. I was there for a 2-night session. I had a brace of 40s and a brace of 50s, and I think it was like a week or 2 weeks later, an hour into January, and I've caught another 50 out there. I mean, it's
especially at that time of the year as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you could pick them, they're going to be big weights, and one of them was one I was really hoping to get as well. I'm never going to say can you really target a fish in there with that many carp? 80 proper ones, I think. Was it 86? I don't remember, but obviously they're not all that big. But I personally think, unless you were spending time in like that margin area, I tell you, where you could argue that there's a higher probability of the wood carving, you're just trying to catch consistently. Because if you can do that, to my way of thought, the bigger ones will come. And there have been times in the year when I caught my fair share of the little ones out there, including sometimes when they really did screw up potential captures of others, and nearly screwed up potential captures of others. But there was, if you could pick, and Hercules, who's
put it out there too,
quite a plain looking carp. But Horton goes very clear in the winter, and it really had like nice chestnut colours, and I wanted it. Yeah. And I felt, and I tell you what, as ever there was an advertisement for using strong gear, I don't think thankfully, I don't. It never stopped raining as well. It was absolutely hammering it down when I had that. But luckily, we had the Gore-Tex over the camera and managed to get a couple of shots. So quite nice ones considering the conditions. But I nearly didn't. She was the one that I nearly didn't have. And how that was 53. So to get robbed of that, obviously I didn't know it at the time, but. Between the swim I caught her from, which is called the ski slope, and the swim next door, the Sick, there is a willow. And to be fair, the bailiffs do a lot of work down Horton, and it's kept very nice, yeah. But that willow had come in, and almost every carp I hooked from the ski slope, kiting right. I mean, clearly they know where the stuff is. So whilst you're getting bites from open water, they weren't it wasn't all no stress, because the initial part of the fight, but you've got to get them close to the swim as quickly as you can, and on a short line, because no more than 6 yards is the tree in the drink. That was the only one that got to it. It was absolutely snag solid. And I was gutted. I mean, I never knew it was her, but it had all the hallmarks of it. Like, if you spoke to me afterwards, I said, I think I've probably lost one of the 40s. And I tried everything, leave the rod for a bit, will it swim out? And I thought it was gone, because, there was no, when I wound down, there was no feeling at all. And I'm just thinking, the scenario where she's managed to shed the hook sitting in the branch. So in the end, after, well after an hour, I thought, I'm going to try, absolutely heaving. And I got close to the tree as I could get. and I wasn't prepared. The net is over the other side of the swim because I think it's gone. And I honestly, and I could say this because of, remember the braid, the feeling that you get, I felt a branch, I'm like full test curve, absolutely heaving. And I felt a sensation of a snap. And the carp, right, it wasn't that far, but you couldn't see it. It was raining and it's dark, so it's not like one of those moonlit lights where you can see anything. She just appeared on her side. Like, for a second, they were like, I don't know, disorientated or whatever. And I was like, you're shocked a little bit because I thought she'd gone, and the net's over there. Like, so you're giving a bit of slack and you're thinking, she's going to try and get back in the sheet. But thankfully, she kind of given in by that, and that was one of the highlights.
Very thankfully, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, blimey. Yeah. That was an impressive season, that Aaron. And after that, you decided this year to move on to our patch. So, Savay, has it always been on your radar to fish there?
The first carp fishing book I ever read was John Harry's book on Savay.
Trying to be pleased to hear that.
Yeah, they were there's some iconic pictures in that book of when you think about like the thick head fish and stuff like that, and Sally, and okay, there are lots of super waters now, but growing up, that was one of the complexes that you were reading an awful lot about. And later on, Harefield across the road, obviously Darren. For me, we chatted about that earlier, didn't we? About when you think about the development in rigs from like people like Lenny Middleton and iconic places. So yes, I'd always read about it. I did have a look from the road, I want to say in the late 90s, considered it. And I'd thought a little bit more because, those real special old carp, the pool of them is, narrowing sharply, do you know what I mean? I mean, they're right, all of them, at the end of their lifespan. Especially when we know in Savay, like if we're talking about the leans, from 1950 through to 68 or something like that was when they went in?
Yeah, certainly 60s and 70s.
Yeah, so we know if you're going to do it, you've got to do it now. And I think I mentioned, chatting to Damo over the Instagram, and I just I asked, I'd seen him with some lovely shots of some of them, and I said, is it still the same score where you can do the days? Because I remember, I think you could actually get day tickets at one stage.
Yeah, you could go down to the newsagents.
Yeah,
it was quite.
So I knew it was an accessible lake. I knew that it was very challenging. I'd read some stuff. Darren Norman, Tim Potts. I loved his section on.
Do you know what? I haven't brought that in actually, but I will give you that DVD called Savay Days, which is Actually, I was driving into work the other day and I forgot. Crikey, I need to bring that in for you to watch.
I think it's a really good. I'd like to see it as well, but just reading it is like the passion and determination that he did on Days to eventually get them out there. So I'm under no illusion of what it's like, but Damien kindly gave me the address. It's quite old school. When you write into the owner, it's like, can you consider me for a place? Obviously, you're very polite. And luckily, the ticket came through, and I truly was super excited. And when I say that, to go there. And that someone did make me laugh. This isn't my line as well, but another day guy said some of the wags on the rotors had called it like the £100 walk or something.
We've all called it that.
Well, it was some of the, literally they get the ticket, but. I know there's.
So it's the first time you had a good look around the lake and just walking around there and stuff. It's quite an impressive lake.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, before I'd seen it, I didn't realise that you still couldn't fish the riverbank. For some reason in my head, I don't know why, wrongly. I knew obviously they hadn't been fishing off of the Long Island for years. Obviously, I knew of Peter's passing away, so I didn't know what the score was because obviously he used to fish off that island. So I kind of felt you're confident enough in your abilities that if I can find one, do you know what I mean? I reckon I could get one. That was the whole idea. Because if you're not confident, what's the point of even trying? I thought there'll be an opportunity. Though I have to say, when it's super excited to get it. When I did go down there and walk it for the first time, and when you walk along, you park in the day guys car park, which is you chuck a right when you come through the gate, and as you walk along the road bank, and to be fair, that's generally quite quiet, isn't it? Most of the syndicate guys, they need a good excuse to fish there, don't they? Yeah. Otherwise they're not tending to be there. And I think you said to me, and it must have, because as you walk along, like trees come down, so you're suddenly afforded a view of the whole of the cottages, and then literally the riverbank beyond it. So it's got to be a good half a mile to the end of the lake, isn't it?
That's a good mile, probably.
Is it? Right, longer,
yeah.
Right? So, I'm getting like a bit of a, you do start to think, this is actually going to be quite challenging. Yeah, I mean, this is a proper expanse of water, and there are limitations because obviously there are a bunch of guys who are, fishing with 3 rods and doing the nights, and I suppose, to be fair, like, I'm not getting a violin out, but that, when you've worked yourself and got your position on the syndicate, you're probably going to be in the areas where you think they are. Do you know what I mean? So as you've definitely got you've got a disadvantage. So either way, I did sitting there when I saw it. I was like, the first walk round, I didn't get to look for it very much, and the reason why that is that a lot of the swims, it was near the start of the season, a lot of the swims are occupied. And to be fair, I did have a game plan of not turning up until July, but I got so excited I ended up coming in June because look, any lake's going to be busy, isn't it? So some of the areas I was to get action from, I never even got to see because they were occupied, and I didn't want to walk into somebody's swim, and I wanted to be a bit more like, just meet people naturally as the time went on. So yeah, but I am lucky in that, you're based in Essex at the moment, so we're 50 odd miles from the Colne Valley, but I am a member of a club lake in the Colne Valley where I can night fish, and it's got some very nice fish in it of its own right. So I kind of thought, what the initial game plan is I'm normally doing like 2 nights a week. I've got a family, I like to do other things, but I am a mad keen carp angler, and that's, like, for me, that's enough. Like, and if I can be tactical, in the recent past about when you go, even better. So I thought the game plan will be is do a night on the club ticket and the days either side on Savay. Now, the first day I did the first walk round, as I said, I chatted to a couple of to one day guy, and yeah, he did mention a couple of other things where I was thinking, this actually sounds like it's going to be super hard to get one. I mean, he said something to me like, you can't fish next to a like, which I don't, look, he meant well, and and I get it. I mean, but I guess, to be fair, Simon, if you did go next to a syndicate guy and then start fly fishing, he's gonna, it's not gonna work, is it?
Maybe.
So he probably had a point, but I was sitting there thinking, wow, like, this is really, like, it's gonna be tough. So anyway, the first time I'm actually come to fish, I actually did find some. I did find some fish in the North Bay, but unbeknown to me, Damo was actually down as well, and he'd stumbled on some in a very similar area. And like, the etiquette is on Savay, in the North Bay you don't fish each other, so the road is long. I'm only there because of Damian, so he's already found them. He'd been down a few hours, so I thought, remember, like, I've got the other lake, so, and it's a good lake, so I thought, well, I checked the other areas of the lake, didn't see anything in the edge, but I still was excited that was, it was one original, and I thought 2 stockies down a margin in relatively shallow water. It would have been half a chance. I can't say whether he would have gotten feeding, but it was still exciting. So I thought, well, that's positive. I went to the club lake and actually caught one. So I thought, there's maybe karma, and so that was a nice old carp. So I was chuffed with that. Come back the next day, and I did my first day. And I've kind of jumping around a little bit here. So I did speak to another day guy who was fishing on the road bank, and we did see a carp that was probably a stocky. So when I come back the next day, remember, the North Bay's taken, all the swims, like the shallows, the secret, the point, all anglers in. So there's not a lot of areas that you can. I was suddenly get the feeling that this 70-acre lake, when you consider where you can actually fish, I didn't fancy the Colne bank. Like, do you see what I mean? It's starting to become much, much smaller.
It does narrow itself down, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially as we've mentioned before, you can't go around to the river bank as well. So either way, I thought, right, the road bank's free. I will fish areas where I think maybe is half a chance. And anyway, I think one of the guys I knew from Sutton come around and we had a chat, and I ended up fishing through to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I did see a carp. It did swim through the middle of the swim and then disappeared. I wasn't remotely near to catching anything. And it was at that stage when the penny dropped that I said to myself, if you fish like this in a stationary way, just turn up, like, which was totally different to what I would have done the day before, if that opportunity had been available. It thought, like, don't do this. Like, you're just going to be, we know it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more than one way to go about it. You could have tried to bait it or something like that, but it's not been something I've tended to do. And I just thought to myself, right, no, going forward, find something. And if you don't find them, just go to the club lake. They're good fish too. So you've not got a wasted journey from Essex. Like, it's all good. And yeah, that's how that was
and
the
things started to materialise. You came across the Asbo first, didn't you? Which was one of the smaller original fish in the lake, and you had a chance of. Well, you did catch that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, how it kind of started was when I arrived at the lake. I'm walking along the first bit you can go and see as a day guy is the road bank, and as I'm walking along. To your left, you start to get a view of the lake, but just before I got to it, so there's still bushes and trees. There's a splash. Now there's your amount of coots and not tufties at that time of year, but loads of coots. But I quickly shuffled along to where you can see the ripples. There was no coot anywhere near it. So okay, I haven't seen the carp, never been in the point because I haven't been able to walk out there before. But like I'm thinking that's a carp. So I've shot round there. You come past like it's out on an arm, isn't it? You go around the lagoon, past the boards and the rat hole or whatever it's called, and I've crept on to the point. And unfortunately, there's no trees you can climb there. So I've just kind of got to the left of the swim where there's a bit of cover because you are trying to stalk them in this scenario. Like I'm trying to I'm thinking it's potentially a carp was just shown, and I should say the range. I mean, it was no more than 10 yards from the bank. Now, I don't know the depths and stuff like this. As I said, I've never been in that area, but I now know the way that swim is in front of it is that you've got like areas that are 18 inches deep. And then it kind of like it's almost like a continuation of the island in front of you, isn't it? The bar. Yeah,
it's a very exposed area, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess if any fish are moving from the cottages, and they did want to go into the lagoon and potentially round into the road bank, that's one of the areas that are going to come. And you've got like the island in front of you. It's about 30 yards, 40 yards, something like that, and some pads just off of its right. I'm watching for about 5 minutes or so, wondering whether this is... what I'm expecting is to maybe another show. What actually happened is that carp comes swimming into the margin. It's like if it didn't have a care in the world, almost inches from the front of the swim. I thought it had to be a stocky of like how brazen it was, and the size as well. I should say it wasn't a big carp. You're thinking Savay 30, 40s and even bigger. This fish is a double. But I'm going to be honest. I'm thinking I don't know how many opportunities I've got in there. Okay, I've not come to catch the stockies, but if this is an opportunity to actually catch a carp from Savay, I'm going to do it. Like on the mindset, that might be my only opportunity. So if someone says, "Oh, did you go there and have a go?" I caught a stockie. It's like, it's better than a kick in the teeth. I've seen this. She's come in, and now I've like waited and it's disappearing, backed off and run off to get the gear. So I'm going to fully fledged have a go. Got back in there, got a rig ready. This fish ended up coming back in, moved off to the right, to the right. And very quickly, and it was natural, there was no bait there, so the water's got a tinge, because this is so shallow, I can see the bottom. So it's at the start of the algae bloom. It was going to get worse in the weeks to come. Upended, big clouds of silt as it's feeding on whatever crustaceans are there or something. I think I said I got a rig ready, and I'm never going to try and throw baits at a carp in the margin, unless you want to spook it. That's not going to work. So I remembered I had a few pellets that I'd been putting into some mix when I've been fishing this Kent lake. So I'd made a tiny cobweb PVA bag that about 10 centimetres, and I thought I'm going to lay a little balance bait, hook that in. And this is where I chanced my arm. Because of all this silt the fish had kicked up, I actually lowered it pretty close, 18 inches, 2 foot of where I thought the carp was. I knew I was chancing my arm, you might spook it, but I'm kind of thinking I'm going to have a look. It's a double, do you know what I mean? It's not what I'm here for anyway, but so I've done that. And this is where the silt that it kicked up all kind of settled. And I thought, I thought this would be taking candy from a baby. I thought this carp was going to see the little patch of bait, it eats the stocking, it's just going to, I'm going to nail it. Well, that's not what happened at all. It cleared up. Now, okay, this carp that I ended up catching is a very old carp, isn't it? I'd even say it had cataracts on its eyes, all very misty eyes, giving away the age. So there is a chance the old boy never saw it at all. But I don't think, my gut feeling was it was like, saw it and just swam off. And I was like, it was almost like, 2 fingers, the royal salutes, like, oh no, I'm not giving up that easy. So I was, wow. And at that moment, I remember Dave called me up and I told him, relayed him this, you're really excited. And I was like, now there's no way that I'm thinking this is a stocky. And I had seen a little bit more of him then. Like the pecs were particularly big in his head. It's like he's an old carp, isn't it? Or was like, he's a very old fish. Like the kind of head and the pecs, the front pecs are not in size relation to the rest of his body. So to fast forward, in the end, he hanged around in a swim, never come quite so close. But I'd get like a few bubbles appear, all about like a kind of small, underarm out. So I got rid of the PVA bag. Maybe it was too blatant. I had a couple of balanced bottom baits. I got like, I just drop underarming out there. You immediately told me this is very shallow, which I found exciting because, like, I think if like we kind of touched on before, like the chances of getting the bite is elevated. Like this is not happening over 12 foot of water. It's happening in 2.5. I had several liners, one of them which I jumped up and ran at, like which is gravel in that swim, but where my line lay wasn't brilliant. It was going over a bit of marginal weed, and I wondered if I was actually going to catch him. I think it took 4 hours from that moment until I actually did hook him, and I wasn't. I'm not going to lie, right? I wasn't. I really wanted to land it. I was nervous, but I was totally of that's what that carp is. Like I saw one other that briefly appeared and disappeared. The whole time it was, I'm pretty sure it was just him there. Yeah, and he was like, I obviously didn't know his name, but you guys, let me know. He's the
Asbo. He's like he's like a friendly. Well, I say he's quite difficult because he always swims around on his own. So for a lot of people that turn up to the lake for the first time, that's likely to be the first fish that they're ever going to see in the lake.
But I suppose we should put it in perspective as well. Like, obviously this season had fished a lot better. I guess the introduction of the new fish. But I remember chatting to you guys and like last year was granite.
Really?
So even a fish like the Asbo clearly couldn't have been throwing itself out. I mean...
No, he got caught a few times than the most last year. But no, I mean, he doesn't. And like I say, I think he's just by the nature of the fact that fish tends to spend a lot of time on its own. I mean, it gets caught a lot, but it spends an awful lot of time on its own as well. I remember fishing for that once down in the lawn swim opposite the Pete's Island. And I was like you, I was first season on there. And I was watching it, swimming around, feeding on the same patch all the time. And I thought, that's it, like what you would probably be thinking. Right, this is it. I'm going to catch my first fish out of Savay on days. It's going to be a small one.
Yep.
And I put a rig in the water and I waited for it to go off. I put a rig in the water and it just never came back. And I remember John coming round later in the afternoon and I said, there was this little fish that kept swimming around and it disappeared as soon as I put a rig in the water. And he went, oh yeah, don't worry about that one, son. It hasn't been caught for 20 years, which was a slight exaggeration. Right, yeah. It gets caught a lot, but it doesn't mean it's an easy fish to catch either.
Yeah, I guess also a lot is relative to Savay, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like
right.
It's I think you guys said, wasn't it? Like, the previous season was like 20 different carp caught from the lake. It's obviously.
But the nature of the lake last year was very similar to this year, with the with a lot of algae in the water, and the water was very, very coloured last year,
right.
And it didn't look healthy last year, and it turns out Damian caught a few fish on maggots. When he worked out what was going on there, the fish were basically on naturals for the whole summer.
That's how he did it, right?
Yeah, and caught those fish on maggots. And when they did start coming out at the end of last season, the limited amount of ones that did come out, they were actually well up in weight. And it was interesting because there was no bait going in there. Normally, there's quite a lot of bait going in. But there was no bait going in because people had given up, really.
Yeah, I suppose 70 acres, very rich water.
So rich.
They can feed on the naturals, yeah.
Yeah, and just talking about these stockies as well, which went in January. I mean, they've nearly put on 10 pound in weight since January. Yeah. So old Savay tradition, it's a very, very rich, a very, very rich lake. So things kind of, once you caught the Asbo, things kind of went quite well after that.
Yeah, So when I found out, when I sent the picture through to Damo and he said it was one of the old ones, I was like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, £17, it's not what you're after, but it is one of the old Savay ones. So I'm really chuffed. But I am a little bit greedy. Like, when I went there, I wanted to get one. You've done that, but now you want a bigger one, yeah? So I think I'd had a holiday with the kids. So I might have been away for a week or something down in Cornwall. And then when I'd come back, I'd checked, all the areas that we kind of mentioned. Like, every time I turned up, you go for a routine, check the road bank. I wasn't generally finding them there. Go out to the point if I could, if no one's there. Check the boards in case they were getting in there. Have a look at that area. I said I think you described was the boat launch. I'm not sure if there's a swim there, but I always had a nose. I never saw one there. Never really got to look at the secret much because that was generally taken. And then I'd make sure I go. Normally, there's people in the shallows, but this time I've gone down there and it's free. And it was the first time I got to look and to kind of describe it. Would you say it's kind of 80, 100 yards out to the real shallows between Peters Island and the Long Island?
Yeah, it's about 105, 110 yards to the Willow on the other side.
The Willow on the left. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's imagine that. So you've got like a bit of a point. Yeah. And then I'm looking out to the lake. I've got a wind coming from like left to right. It's kind of one of those days where there's a bit of cloud cover. It's not super hot, and there's a bit of a blow. And I thought it looked really good for the shallows. But I'd already promised myself I wasn't just going to fish, you know what I mean? Like, you've got to see something. But yeah, it looks, there's a bit of weed out there. I'd already heard that it's done a few fish. But I thought, we're going to try to catch them, not like stationary fish, because, I know how much blanking goes on. So I've looked for a good 10, 15 minutes and I haven't seen anything out there. And I think some foliage has been taken around from the kind of left. Because as you look to your left, you're looking straight down the canal bank and half a mile or whatever it is, because there's a big stretch of water where the wind is channeling down. And the first thing I noticed is it's really shallow right in front of the swim. It's like a continuation, a bar, or if you want to call it a plateau, whatever. But like from the bank to at least a good underarm, I don't know, 6 yards, 8 yards or whatever it is, shallow. 18 inches or so. And I remember seeing like a still steel rope there was sort of like there. So so it gives you an idea of the clarity that I've got. The water's still got the green tinge. This is only like maybe a week and a half after the first capture, but it's not as bad as it's going to get. As I've walked up to this, that's my first thing. I can see this. I'm just approaching the thing, and I'm not, if I'm honest with you, I've just spent all this time looking at the area where I thought there would be. I didn't really think I was going to see anything. On the left, as it starts to deepen off, I like actually a double take. There's a carp that is tails up, really weird, because rather than feeding on the upslope, it was, feeding on the downslope, unmistakably. And as soon as I've seen it, because there's no cover here at all, I've just started to creep down and creep backwards. Like, I don't want to spook it, it's way catchable range. And I literally just crept backwards. Like, if there was a tree to hide behind, I would have continued to observe, but I'm not. Like, that is 100% a feeding carp, and it's in shallow water. So I've just crept backwards, and I'm like, I just want to run off and go and get the gear. And as Sod's Law plays out, I think I got as I'm passing the Syndicate car park, a chap just turned up and he starts chatting to me, and I'm thinking, I haven't left anything in the swim. I hope he doesn't want to go there, kind of thing. But thankfully, he said he was off round the river bank. So I had a quick chat with him, and I was like secretly kind of hoping that conversation's going to wound down as quickly as possible because I want to get up there. So got the gear straight back down there, got the rigs sorted, crept back out. The carp's gone. I thought, what a result. Because normally, when you're finding them in the margin as opportunities, sometimes the real struggle is getting a rig into position because there's no cover here. He's gone. I've underarmed to exactly where it is, and thankfully the first cast went where I wanted to. I thought I'm not too fussed about having, even in a margin opportunity like that, having more than one rig in there, because I think if I the problem is the disturbance. But if I'm very quick and then get the lines down, slack lines and whatever they're not gonna know. And obviously the line lay's pretty good here as well, because the water, this gravel feature, this shallow gravel feature is shallowing away from me. So first rod's absolutely fine. I thought I'll put a rod on the front of it as well, which you remember that's looking straight down the canal bank. That didn't go exactly where I wanted it. It landed shallower, but I thought, no, you're not about to start thrashing the water here. Like these opportunities might be totally fleeting. That's going to have to do. So it's probably landed in, I don't know, a foot, 18 inches. So the fish would have to be right up on the shallows for that to work. I'd rather have been a little deeper. Slackened off. I literally scattered a few broken baits. It was at range I could throw a broken bait around both the left and the rod in front. And then just got right out to the back, because there's a couple of, old not used swims, both to your left and to your right. Yep. So I'm sitting by the one on the right near the tree line. So I'm a good, 15 yards away. So I'm not skylined at all. And like the rod tips are back as sort of I can get, and all good. So I've got the kettle going. I'm just I'm hoping, I've got the rig in position. There was a carp here 10 minutes ago. This is looking good, I'm hoping it's just going to appear back. So, you know what it's like. You're sitting there, you get too excited, and you want to go and have a look. A good hour or so's gone now. I've had a couple of cups of tea or whatever. As always, I've eaten most of the supplies that were supposed to be lasting me the entire trip, in that time. And so, I've now thought, right, I'll go and creep to that swim. The one to the left, because there's a willow there. It's only a small willow. It's not like something you could climb, but I thought at least I can, when I creep up to the lake, the willow's in front of me, and I can then have a little look. So you're not looking exactly where I'm fishing, but you're looking just to the left of it, yeah? 6 yards or 8 yards to the left. I just got there and was standing there for no more than a couple of minutes when left to right, unmistakable sign of it. And remember, the wind's coming straight into me, so I can't, and this carp is down a little bit, unmistakable silhouette of a carp. I'm like, wow, it's moving on the line of where that left-hand rod is fishing. So, okay, I don't know what's going on where the left-hand rod is, but that is not the carp that I saw before. The first one, I'd guess it was an upper 20. It wasn't a stocky, but it was not one of the big girls in Savay. That fish was the frame of a 40, without a doubt. I just thought to myself, wow, So I'm that excited because I've got the rigs in positions, you know what I mean? And she swims, I would say that fish was a couple of foot below the surface. That's and it's on a beeline to the rig. So I've crept back to this thing, and it was a good hour. I'm thinking it's on, it can go, and nothing's happening. So you know what confidence is like? It's kind of ebbs and flows, doesn't it? Every time you got to see, I saw the first one, I'm going to catch one. Then nothing's happened. Then I've seen this fish and nothing's happened. Didn't get any liners, but I shouldn't have got liners, because remember, the line lay's really good and bobbins are on the floor. If you've got a liner, it's probably a problem. Anyway, I'm starting to think now maybe this is not going to happen. I thought I'm going to very cautiously approach the area where the rods are, and just to see if I can see anything. So again, no cover, but I'm sort of creeping in. I literally got in sight of where the left-hand rod is positioned, and I was like, there's a fish over the thing. I can see the silhouette of a carp over it. As I thought that, try to get down, because I can remember I'm going to spook it. If this is all happening at such short range, as I've started to creep down, it erupted. Literally, as the moment I've that's a carp, there's the eruption. There's a small delay before the Neville starts to go, because obviously the line slack. And then
there always is.
Yeah, she's bolting out towards Alcatraz. And remember, there's trees in that margin. Now, don't get me wrong, that's quite a way away, but I knew I couldn't just let it run anywhere it wanted to, or it's going to end up in a tree. So it was very aggressive, the initial run, and thankfully I turned it after a bit. When I got it back in front of me, it wasn't the most dramatic fight. It was all under the rod tip, but I could see that I was playing a nice common. So I was, now this is a proper Savay carp, exactly what, and I'm thinking this is my opportunity, and thankfully no more drama, got her in the net. I know she's one of them at this stage, but I've not had a proper look. And then, long story short, when I've managed to get her up on the bank, got all the self-take kit, obviously ready before that, very distinctive carp. There's the nick out the tail, the very sloped head, and the Wimbledon.
Yeah, you should be honoured to catch that one.
Yeah, chuffed to bits. I mean, I think she'd been very big before they'd spawned, wasn't she?
She was, upper 40s, and what was it, upper 39? Was it 30?
She was ounces under 40, but it wasn't going 40. Do you know what I mean? It was obviously you're a carp angler. If you could have caught it over the mark, but it's the carp.
Like you say as well. I mean, you say it's the achievement, isn't it? That counts there.
Well, Dave called me up a little bit later, and he said, "Do you think that's the best carp you ever caught?" And I said, "I think it's got to be." Like, I came for one, and you just achieved it. Yeah, and it's one of the proper ones, and you've lucky enough had, one of the most prize ones in.
Do you know what? It was always a carp that if I thought I was going to catch one at a Savay, for some reason, I always used to catch big commons, and I always thought if I get one, I reckon it'd be. And I never did, and unfortunately, she passed away a few.
Yeah, gutting.
But they're old fish.
Yeah,
but I would have loved to have caught her. Yeah. And watched her feeding in the water lots of times, and it got better though, didn't it? You moved. Do you want to talk about?
I guess we should say she didn't pass away the moment I caught her. I'm killing carp.
I've killed a few as well, so don't worry about that.
That was a few months later, unfortunately. Fast forward now to I did fish the night on the Club Lake. I don't think I caught one that time. I'm only too greedy, but I come back the next day. There was plenty of times when I turned up at Savay and you'd have a walk round and you just didn't find them. But I think with an expansive water like that, that's going to be the way. But my next opportunity was in the same swim but a different scenario. So I think you're going now maybe 2 weeks later.
Right.
And the water now, the visibility is really poor. So now it's the pea soup stage, and I'm like, this is going to make this really challenging. So I checked all the areas of the lake that you can check. So the same kind of scenario, you're in a bit of a routine. Got up to the point, it's free again. Obviously checked the shallow feature first, nothing there. Checked off to the left, nothing there. I'm standing now looking out towards the actual shallows proper, so between Peters and the Long Island, and I'm looking for a good 10 minutes because I'm hoping I'm going to see something here, like shallow water, a bit of weed out there, like at range, and you're thinking like they should be here. Again, the wind was coming a little bit more in this time towards me, and I think I've been 10-15 minutes. I'm just starting to think, right, they're not here. I'm going to go and have to walk round into the to the North Bay, Tiger Bay, and then check out the canal bank. As I thought that, directly in front of me, maybe a little off to the left, a swell. Is that a roach or what? I continues watching, and about 5 minutes later, a little flat spot. Now, in normal Savay conditions with gin clear water, I now know there's a bar there, and that fish was in and around the bar, so it's in shallow water. And you would have been able to seen it, but maybe it wouldn't have been there if the water had been hadn't been so murky. I'm thinking like, game on, this is definitely a carp out there. And again, you were talking, no more than like an underarm. So again, short range. I've shot off, got the gear. This was harder to get the rod in because that one, I reckon, I'm guessing here now, because you're seeing like. It was really subtle. Sometimes there'd be like a little disturbance or a little swell, and there's a ripple as well. So I can't there was definitely four, but I had a strong feeling there was more than one carp there, because sometimes I'd see like disturbance and very quickly I didn't think it was moving. I thought there's multiple carp in shallow water was my feeling. So it appeared the action slowed down, like the sightings, and I felt like they'd moved a little bit to the right. And I thought that's the opportunity, and I thought I'm not going to cast. At them. Bear in mind, you could be fishing at 100 yards here, like we've just discussed. So I thought I'm going to belt it out towards the island. Hopefully that disturbance, I know sound travels, but I'm hoping it's going to be more subtle. Trap the lead as it lands on the surface, skip it across the surface, and that way, when I approach the area where they were, I'm going to lower the rod down. And when I did that on the first cast, I was absolutely stoked. And the reason why is because at this stage, they might not be in shallow water. For all I know, this could be shelving away quickly, and it could be 8 foot. And if I'm doing this in 8 foot of water, it would be better having surface gear out. Well, as you know, bear in mind, I can see the tubing coming on. Lowered it exactly where the bulk of the sightings were, and it has done two things. It's cracked down, and it's cracked down very quickly. So A, I'm fishing in shallow water, and B, the rig is presented. I'm being a little bit greedy here, but I didn't see the reason why not to. I then fished the other rod a little bit, like, you know, maybe a yard and a half to the right. Scattered a few baits around there. And this is where it got interesting. Like, I didn't get, like, I had quite rubbish line lay, because in front of me of where this bar turns out, you know, when I saw later on in the season when the clarity returned, the between me and this feature, there's like a strip of weed. So, you know, the bobbins were dancing up and down. And in the end, I think I might have even taken the bobbins off, because, like, you know, with the wind blowing, it was just, you're just getting false bleeps and stuff like that. They weren't liners, it was the wind. What I did see was super exciting is as that afternoon progressed, so we're several hours later now, again, I've retired right away from the edge, you've got the rigs in, started to see some swirls again. They were definitely coming back to the area, and then this, I thought it was a broken dorsal. I'd see like a tench-like tail, and this happened like 2 or 3 times. It would just appear, and I'm thinking, oh, that's like some broken dorsal. In the end, I'll come to that later, it wasn't, yeah? And so I reckon we were probably, you know, 4 or 5 hours now the rod's been out. Remember, Dave's called me again, you know, always chatty carp and stuff. And I'm saying, I don't know whether this is going to go this time. Like, I'm super excited, because it's without doubt another opportunity. But, you know, these are tricky fish, you know. Just because you've managed to get your rod in doesn't mean one of them are going to do something silly. And yeah, it eventually rattled. It's rattled, it's run off to the right. Thankfully, I've got it in pretty quickly. It's fighting like a good fish. I think 2 things played out to what was about to happen. Is when I hooked that carp, it went off towards Peter's Island. Didn't get anywhere near it, but it went off to the right. So I went and stood in that little swim. So where my rod is fishing and where I am is probably, I don't know, 10 yards or whatever. So I've played it in. Another really nice Savay carp. You know, I'm thinking it's a male by the frame. 35 pound it went, really long. You know,
was that the walnut?
No, that was common. It was common. So So you've gone from the Wimbledon to this, and then when I've done the photograph that, put it back, then it's rattled about an hour or so later, and that turned out to be the carp, which I thought when I was seeing this dorsal flicking up and tail, it was actually its tail was damaged, and that's what it was. So yeah, she hanged around, and I ended up with a brace. Yeah.
It's amazing, because I thought you would have disturbed fish in that area. What do you think was going on in the swim then?
In that scenario, well, I think I got lucky that the 35 had ran out. You know, and I think, you know, look, if you'd played it from the swim, I think eventually probably anything would have spooked, because she'd ran right, and I'd gone right and could from that area. The battle's taken out, you know, away from the swim, and thankfully didn't spook the other one, because clearly that carp, the other carp, 100% was the one I'd seen earlier. Like the tench-like dorsal that turned out to be its actual towel was unmistakable, you know, that, and she was 34, so it's like, you know, 35 common and 34 common, like, you know, proper.
Would you want to put a guess how many fish you think were in the swim that day?
Well, I don't think there was 15 or anything like that, but I felt there was, you know, like 4 or 5 of them knocking around, and I'd still say, like we touched on before, the coloured water made a difference. Yeah, I think quite likely it would have spooked otherwise. And
then after that, then Aaron.
Yeah, I know I've been very fortunate. Before we say any of this, I know that, you know, I was. Other times you could be, you know, doing the same tactics as I am and maybe not having these opportunities. So I'm kind of, when I tell this war story, I'm aware that I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. So yeah, my next opportunity was I'm doing the usual walk round. I think we are just a week later, and I should say, actually, I had a right result then, because when I went to the club late that night, I actually caught another old school Combe Valley common. So I'd had like
it was all working.
Yeah, it's like, you know, when your luck's in, your luck's in. So I was very fortunate. So anyway, I'm back a week or so later, checking all the spots. I've come into the point, and there's a bit of bubbling just as you look at the island in front of you, just to the right. And I know this is shallow now, because obviously I've been in there when I had the Asbo. obviously the bottom's always bubbling. There's weed all over the place in Savay Lake, but I'm just wondering, like, is that the bottom? Is it a weed or is it a fish? Moments later, a carp has just risen. Like, so this is again an underarm range. I'm like, wow. Like, again, back out of the swim as carefully you can, no cover. Gone and got the tackle, got in there. So, that fish had disappeared again. So you're having a bit of fortune here. So very quickly, I've got the rig to where the carp was in front of the little strip of weed where the bubbling was. So obviously, you don't have to worry about bait placement. He was feeding there, 10 minutes ago. And when I was looking about where I put my left-hand rod, despite the coloration in the water, like, I felt when I looked towards the island, it looked muddy. And do you remember, like, when I said I'd seen the Asbo, I'd seen that kicking up silts. So it's not under the realms of possibility. I've just seen a carp. Like, I'm like, that looks not just the luminous green colour, but much more dirtier. So I did exactly what I did down in the point swim. Cast long-ish, the island's not very far away. Retrieved. This is further out than I'd ever fished in that swim. Lowered the rod again, and you've got it not quite as clean. It didn't crack down like the bar in the shallow swim, but I'm thinking I'm fishing, and it's shallow judging by the time. So I could just scatter a few baits around, and then a totally mental and something maybe I'll never repeat, and I'm very, very pleased to have had happened to me. The first take was a 40-pound common. At this stage, I'm thinking, is there only big commons in Savay? Because whenever I thought Savay, I think mirrors. But I now know that there is a good head of good commons. So,
unfortunately, that was the one that I might have foul hooked.
Yes, yeah. She's got a name because one eye is like jet black. Oh, no. Okay, right. So, yeah, really, really nice fish. And that, shortly after, again, have to think the coloured water mattered. I've with just one rod in position, I've photographed her, returned her, caught the walnut, and I was chuffed to bits because very quickly in the fight I saw I was playing a mirror, a very distinctive, short, maybe Italian style, with a cluster of scales on its flank, like a carp I'd seen before. One I think when we were talking about Tin Pot, he wrote about. Lovely fish. So now I'm like, at that stage, I'm like, I've caught way more than I ever thought I was going to catch. So I truly was happy with the Wimbledon. And now this is like, beyond a dream. I re-put the rods out, but I never really thought that. I've just had a brace. This is superb. Obviously, all my gear's soaked. This is only like mid-morning. The weather was spot on. Like, it was like threatening rain, but it didn't. So do you know what I mean? It's the kind of weather where you don't think they're going to be sunbathing. Wasn't a lot of wind, just a little ripple, but enough, like, feeding more rather than cruising weather. And I've got another 2 takes, like in the early afternoon, and that was the first one was a very special carp. Now that one, when I landed that, I wasn't sure what it was because of the split in the tail. Like, I don't think it's damaged. It's like, probably like deformed. On her tail's got a split. And I remember when Matty walked in the swim later on, I explained to him, he said that's a lager. Yeah. The frame looked right, but I didn't know the tail. So I'll come back to that in a second. And the other one was a very pretty 30-pound common with a heart-shaped tail. So yeah, 4'4". Yeah. And the lager, like, the Wimbledon special, who knows which one's more special, but the history of that fish, and for anyone who doesn't know, being on the front cover of, the first Carp Fisher magazine in 81.
Yeah. Mike Wilson. Yeah. And then Rob Malin's...
In the book where it got the name,
lager was to blame. Yeah.
And I said to you, like, I wasn't joking as well. I thought, like, when I packed up that, one nice thing happened. One of your friends, Matty, come in and, I was chatting to him and let him know I've been really lucky and what have you, and I guess this should show how etiquette on different lakes. He turned around and said, are you coming back in tomorrow? And bearing in mind, like, I'm the new face there, and like, I just said, well, I would like to, not I am. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd like to, and he said, oh, fine, like, if you're coming back in tomorrow, we'll leave it. So that early evening, I reeled in. I did go and have a beer in Harefield before I went to the
I like what you said about the camera as well. You didn't want to take the camera off you. You carried it everywhere with you like it's like the crown jewels.
Yeah, somebody might say it's sad, but I thought I may never repeat anything like that. And we've had 4 Savay carp in a day on my camera. Yes, I took it into the pub with me. So it's sitting under the table as I'm sitting there having a pint.
Oh, that's great.
Then did the night on the lake. I remember mentioning to you, I did do one other thing. Now, who knows whether, you never know whether these things matter or not, but before I left, hoping that I could get back in there the next day, because I'll be honest, there'll be no looking the next day. Like, this would be the first time I'd be coming back to go in the swim. And I scattered a few baits out, not a crazy amount at all, because you know, Savay is a low stock lake. You know, if they'd just done the off, I kind of thought I'd only want the baits remaining in that swim that I'd be happy to fish over. So 25, 30 baits scattered around the area between the two areas the two marks I was catching from. Come back the next day, the swim was free, which I thought was superb etiquette and really nice. Because clearly it could have easily been taken and it wasn't. I guess for anybody who doesn't know, like, you know, you've got to be off the lake as a day guide by 9, and so, you know, a syndicate guy, a rota guy could easily get the swim if you wanted to. I went and had a couple of cups of tea with another chap I'd met down the bank. I wasn't in a mad rush to get the rods out, because I kind of felt like, I think I said to you before, like I wasn't arriving at Savay at 6 in the morning. I was generally arriving mid-morning. Like, my belief was where I'm going to find them in the edge is not the same as where they're going to be in the early hours of the morning. That's two different scenarios. So wasn't bothered about getting the rods out early. I was still just so, you know, chuffed with what had happened yesterday. So, yeah, I had a couple of cups of tea, come down, got them out. The weather was very, very different. Much sunnier, like not total sun. You know, you're getting a little bit of cloud cover, but not quite as good as feeding conditions as the previous day. So anyway, by about 11 midday, something like that, I was at the back of the point, because, you know, Savay, there's so many nooks and crannies to go and have a look at, and behind this swim you've got the lagoon, and you've got the entrance to the lagoon, and I wanted to go and have a nose. You never know, so I'd gone sort of round there. You want to be on your rods, but I hadn't seen anything. So I'm round having a look at the lagoon, and nothing was directly by me, nothing was there. As I was about to walk back into the swim, another day member's come walking along, and I've got chatting to him like it's his first time we'd walked round Savay and what have you, and while we're chatting, I remember you asked me, were the takes eruptions? And from the point they hadn't been, this literally, you had the scenario where the water just erupted. So it's another shallow water bite. I had no clue there was a fish in the swim. Hadn't seen anything, not the telltale times like before, no clue. The rod's just, you know, literally gone into meltdown. I have sprinted, you know, I'm not far away, you know, but you're just a mirror at a few yards, but this thing's going at a rate of knots, and you'll know, like just to the right of the island, there's a big set of pads. It's making a beeline for it. Thankfully, I had heavy gear on, you know, stepped up size 4 hook, heavy line, you know, and I knew that I had to stop it. You couldn't just give it line, or you would have reached the pads. In the finish, it's gone off to the left, played it back in. It did get weeded, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking afterwards. I didn't know that was the only one that didn't have a good hook hold, but I did land it, and shortly before it went in the net, I saw what I was playing. Now, I hadn't heard of that carp before, but Damian, when we were like chatting over text the night before, had sent for a few pictures saying like what common had you had, and he said, was it this one? I said, oh, it's not that one, but that's a real brute of a common. Massive shoulders, really thick wrist, and quite a golden colour fish. A male, I believe, as well, and can be like mid-40s. So just before I've netted it, I've seen it's another good one, and I've got more than an inkling of what it is, and yeah, she went in the nets, and that was the end of my summer.
Yeah, the pop. That's a really gnarly carp, that is. I said to you before, I mean, I've seen people with that on the bank, and that thing just goes absolutely mental. It's
you asked me about that, and she was one of the well-behaved ones.
I think she made up for it in the water by the sounds of it, didn't she?
I think you're right. Sometimes, like I've noticed that with self-takes as well. You know, not always, but like, you know, by the time you've got the gear out, like they're recovering. I think that's the thing as well sometimes. But no, I mean, like I think she'd had a big old fight, and
sorry, we can say she, like you say.
I keep saying
male,
yes. No, you're right. I was just habit. But yeah, really, really, really cracking carp, and so I kind of like, I know how hard Savay is, and I'm under no illusions that you could repeat all this. And I think one thing I would add to this whole thing is there was some bits of what I was taught in Walthamstow all those years before that if I hadn't been as experienced, you know, for the years of fishing, that you might not have been able to replicate this, you know, like just how critical, you know, location is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, be interesting. You know, obviously you were the one that spotted them, and you were getting on those fish, and obviously, you know, fishing for them properly, and just knew what to do in that situation. And I often think, when you tell those stories, what would I have done in that situation? And with the result of being the same, and that was spectacular. That was definitely. I know you're quite modest about what you catch, but it was spectacular, and I don't think it's going to be repeated on there for a while, actually. But yeah.
No, you never know. Every dog has its day. So I'm sure there's been some other amazing captures out of that lake in the past. So I'm sure
there'll be a few syndicate members listening to this and taking note of what happened on those sessions. Aaron, it's been a great podcast. Thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Look forward to seeing the book come out anyway.
Yeah.
But best of luck with that. And like I say, you can catch Aaron on Carp Journey.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers, chaps.
Thanks.
Bye.
You okay?
The Thinking
Yeah.
Tackle
It's
podcast.
very. I was mindful. It felt like because I remember you